Mom, Dad, I think it would be better for everyone if you didn't come to my wedding.
Those words from my only daughter's mouth still echo in my mind all these years later. The daughter we raised with every ounce of love we had. The girl we sacrificed everything for, telling us we weren't good enough to witness her marriage. Isn't it strange how life teaches you lessons about love? How the people you pour your heart into can sometimes be the ones who break it most completely. And how sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to stand up for yourself. My name is Linda Peterson, and this is the story of how my husband George and I went from being the parents who weren't good enough to attend our daughter's wedding to the ones who stopped it right in the middle of the ceremony. If you're watching this from home right now, I hope you're comfortable. Maybe you're in Texas where it's warm, or up in Minnesota where the snow is falling. Wherever you are, I promise this story will touch something in your heart. If it does, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear that standing up for yourself doesn't mean you've stopped loving someone. But let me start from the beginning. When our daughter Sienna was born 26 years ago, George and I made a promise that she would have everything we never did. We were simple people with simple dreams. George worked at the local factory, and I cleaned homes during the day while taking online accounting classes at night. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but filled with love. I believed with my whole heart that if you raised a child with love, honesty, and good values, they would carry those things into adulthood. I believed our daughter understood sacrifice and appreciation. I believed that the bond between parent and child was unbreakable. What I didn't see coming was how quickly everything would change once Sienna met Ethan Williams at that charity fundraiser she was catering. The handsome heir to the Williams real estate empire with his perfect teeth and designer clothes. The man whose family had a wing named after them at the local hospital. He invited me to dinner, Mom. She had squealed over the phone that night. At the Bellevue. Can you believe it? Me. Looking back now, I should have noticed something in her voice. That tiny note of shame when she said me. As if she was already wondering if she was good enough. 3 months later, she called again. This time, her voice was different. Controlled. Professional. Like she was talking to a stranger, not her mother. Ethan proposed last night, she said, without the excitement I expected. The wedding will be at the Rosewood Estate in June. Oh honey, that's wonderful. I said, already thinking about the dress I would wear. Wondering if George's suit from our nephew's wedding still fit him. Your father and I are so happy for you. Do you want to come over for dinner this weekend to celebrate? I can make your favorite pot roast. There was a pause. A long one. Actually, Mom, she said, her voice strangely formal. I'm really busy with wedding planning. And work. And Ethan's family has a lot of events coming up. That was the first weekend she didn't come home. Then came the second. And the third. 6 months passed with only brief phone calls and canceled plans. Then came the strange comments. Things that didn't make sense. Just so you know, I've told Ethan's parents that you and Dad are distant relatives who helped raise me after my parents passed, she mentioned casually during one call. 0. The shock felt like ice water in my veins. What? Why would you say something like that, Sienna? It's just easier this way, Mom. The Williams family is really particular about background. It doesn't really matter, does it? It's just a little white lie. But it wasn't the last lie. Soon, we heard from mutual friends that Sienna was telling people she had almost bought the wedding venue herself with her successful catering business. The same business that George and I had taken a second mortgage to help her start. I couldn't understand what was happening to my little girl. The one who used to curl up in my lap during thunderstorms. The one who made homemade cards for our anniversaries because store-bought ones were too impersonal. Where had that daughter gone? The breaking point came 3 months before the wedding. We were sitting in our living room. The same room where Sienna had taken her first steps. When she finally said the words that would change everything. I think it would be better if you both didn't come to the wedding, she said, looking at the floor instead of our faces. Ethan's family, they have expectations. There will be judges and politicians there. CEOs. I can't risk. Well, you know. Risk what, Sienna? George asked, his voice shaking in a way I'd never heard before. Just complications. Questions. It's better for everyone's image this way. Our daughter was ashamed of us. The people who had given her everything were now an embarrassment to be hidden away. I'd like to say I handled it with grace in that moment, that I was understanding and calm. But the truth is, I cried. Hard, racking sobs that came from somewhere deep inside me. George just sat there, silent, a single tear rolling down his weathered cheek. What Sienna didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have anticipated, was that the very next day, we would receive a call that would change everything. "Mrs. Peterson, this is Margot Campbell from the Rosewood Estate. I'm calling about your daughter's wedding. There seems to be some confusion about the payment for the additional services requested. The vintage champagne fountain, the imported flowers, the custom ice sculpture. Sienna assured us you would be covering these costs, but we haven't received the deposit yet." In that moment, standing in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear, something inside me shifted. The pain didn't disappear. No, it was still there, sharp and throbbing. But alongside it grew something else. Something stronger. If our daughter didn't want us at her wedding, that was her choice to make. But if she thought she could cut us out of her life while simultaneously using our money to impress people who would never know we existed, well, that was a choice too. And choices have consequences. Are you still with me? I hope you're comfortable wherever you're watching from. Maybe you're nodding along because you've felt that particular kind of hurt that only family can inflict. Or maybe you're wondering what happened next. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories like this one. Because what happened on Sienna's wedding day wasn't just the end of one chapter. It was the beginning of something none of us could have predicted. You know, before I tell you what happened next, I should probably tell you more about who we were, George and I, before all this wedding drama began. George and I met at community college when we were both 19. He was studying mechanical engineering, and I was taking business courses. Neither of us came from money. My father was a postal worker, and George's dad worked construction his whole life. We both knew what it meant to work hard for everything you get. Our first apartment was a tiny one-bedroom above a laundromat. The washing machines would shake our floor every time they hit the spin cycle. We used to joke that we got free massage chairs with the rent. We saved every penny we could. No vacations, no fancy restaurants, just the two of us building a life together dollar by dollar. When I found out I was pregnant with Sienna, we were ecstatic but terrified. How would we afford a baby? George took on extra shifts at the factory, working 60 hours a week sometimes. I kept cleaning houses until I was 8 months along. My belly so big I could barely reach the sinks. The night Sienna was born was the happiest of our lives. She was perfect, 7 pounds, 4 ounces, with a head full of dark hair just like George's. When they placed her in my arms, I made a silent promise that this little girl would never know the kind of struggle we had experienced. She would have opportunities. She would have choices. "She's going to college," George whispered, looking down at her tiny face. "No matter what it takes." And we meant it. We started a college fund that same month, putting in just $25 at first. Some months, that was all we could afford. But we never missed a payment, not once in 18 years. Sienna was a bright child, always curious. By 3, she could recite the alphabet backward. By 5, she was reading chapter books. Her teachers always told us she was special, that she had potential. "Your daughter could go far," her 4th grade teacher told us during a conference. With the right opportunities, we took those words to heart. We couldn't afford fancy summer camps or private schools, but we did everything we could. I took her to the library 3 times a week. George taught her how to change a tire and fix a leaky faucet. We wanted her to be both book smart and practical. As Sienna grew older, I noticed she had a flair for presentation. She would arrange her food in artistic patterns on her plate. She folded napkins into swans for our anniversary dinner when she was 12. By 16, she was planning elaborate themed parties for her friends, decorating every inch of our backyard on a shoestring budget. "You have a gift," I told her. "You make beautiful things out of almost nothing." When she graduated high school and announced she wanted to start a catering business instead of going to college right away, we were surprised but supportive. "College can wait," George said. "If this is your passion, we're behind you." That's when we took out the second mortgage on our house, $50,000 to help her start Sienna's sophisticated spreads. We converted our garage into a commercial kitchen, getting all the proper permits and equipment. George installed everything himself to save money. The first 2 years were tough. Sienna worked around the clock, and so did we. I helped with the bookkeeping after my regular job. George delivered food when she was double booked. We were a team, the 3 of us against the world. Then came the breakthrough. Sienna landed a contract catering monthly events for the local country club. Suddenly she was serving food to the wealthiest people in town. She started coming home with stories about judges and doctors and business owners. "Mom, Mrs. Lancaster asked for my business card today," she said one evening, her eyes shining. "She's on like 5 charity boards." I was so proud of her. My daughter, being recognized for her talent and hard work. What I didn't realize was how those glimpses into another world were affecting her. Little changes started happening. She dyed her dark hair blonde. She started speaking differently, dropping the slight regional accent we all had. She became obsessed with brands, things I'd never even heard of. "Mom, you can't wear those shoes anymore," she told me once. "They look cheap." It hurt, but I brushed it off. She was young, finding herself. All kids go through phases where they're embarrassed by their parents, right? Then she met Ethan Williams at that charity fundraiser she was catering. The Williamses were old money, 3 generations of real estate development in our city. They lived in a gated community and summered in Europe. They were the kind of family who had their Christmas cards professionally photographed on their yacht. The first time Sienna mentioned him, I could hear the awe in her voice. "He went to Princeton, Mom." "Princeton. And he drives a Tesla." When she brought him home for dinner 2 months later, I spent the entire day cleaning and cooking. I used the good dishes, the ones we only brought out for Thanksgiving and Christmas. I wanted everything to be perfect. Ethan was handsome, I'll give him that. Tall, with that confident posture that comes from never having to doubt your place in the world. He was polite, calling me ma'am and George sir, complimenting my pot roast even though I could tell he barely touched it. But there was something in the way he looked around our home. A slight tightening around his eyes when he noticed the worn carpet or the outdated kitchen. He asked George what he did for a living with the kind of forced interest that made it clear the answer didn't really matter. After dinner, when Sienna was showing him photos from her childhood, I overheard him whisper, "You grew up here the whole time? Like your entire childhood." The way he said "here" made our home sound like some kind of third world country. When they left that night, George said what I was thinking. "He thinks he's better than us. Maybe he's just nervous," I said, not wanting to admit what I'd seen too. "It's his first time meeting us." It was also the last time. From then on, Sienna always had an excuse for why Ethan couldn't join us for family dinners. He was working late. He had plans with his parents. He wasn't feeling well. Then came the engagement, which Sienna told us about over the phone rather than in person. No engagement party with us included. Just a perfect Instagram post of her hand with a diamond ring that probably cost more than our house. Captioned, "I said yes to forever with my soulmate. #blessed. The wedding planning began, and Sienna became increasingly distant. When she did call, it was always about the wedding, always about costs. "Mom, the venue requires a $10,000 deposit," she said during one call. "Can you and Dad help? It's the Rosewood estate. It's perfect and exactly what I've always dreamed of." Of course we said yes. We'd been saving for her wedding since she was a little girl. We transferred the money the same day. 2 weeks later. "The photographer I want is $8,500, but he's the best in the state." Again, we transferred the money. Then it was the flowers, the dress, the band, each request larger than the last. We dipped into our retirement savings. We took out a personal loan. We never questioned it because this was our only daughter's wedding. What else would we be saving for if not for her happiness? All the while, Sienna's visits became shorter and less frequent. When she did come over, she was always on her phone, texting or taking calls, distracted. She stopped asking about our lives entirely. It was as if we had become ATMs rather than parents. The first real betrayal, the one that should have opened my eyes, came 6 months before the wedding. I was at the grocery store when I ran into Beverly Cooper, an old friend whose daughter had gone to school with Sienna. "Linda, I heard the wonderful news about Sienna's engagement," Beverly said, hugging me in the produce section. "Caroline told me all about it. Such a shame about Sienna's upbringing, though. Being raised by distant relatives after losing her parents so young." I stood there, holding a head of lettuce, completely confused. "What are you talking about, Beverly?" Beverly's face fell. "Oh dear. Caroline said that's what Sienna told everyone at her engagement party. That her parents died when she was young and she was raised by relatives, you and George." The lettuce slipped from my hand, landing with a dull thud on the linoleum floor. I couldn't breathe. My daughter was telling people we weren't her real parents. that we were just distant relatives. I called Sienna as soon as I got to my car. Is it true? I asked, not bothering with hello. Are you telling Ethan's family and friends that your father and I are not your real parents? The silence that followed told me everything. Mom, you don't understand, she finally said. Ethan's family, they're different. They care about things like lineage and background. And what's wrong with your background? My voice was shaking. What's wrong with being the daughter of George and Linda Peterson? Another silence. Nothing's wrong with it, she said, but I could hear the lie in her voice. It's just complicated. There's nothing complicated about the truth, Sienna, I said, tears streaming down my face now. We're your parents. We've loved you and supported you your entire life. How could you deny us like this? I'm not denying you, she said, her voice hardening. I'm just reimagining my history for people who wouldn't understand. That night, I cried in George's arms for hours. Our daughter was ashamed of us. So ashamed that she'd rather invent dead parents than admit she came from working-class people who lived in a modest home and worked with their hands. Maybe we should confront her, George suggested. Really make her understand how much this hurts. But I was afraid that pushing too hard would mean losing her completely. So we said nothing. We swallowed our pain and kept writing checks for the wedding, hoping that somehow, after the stress of planning was over, our real daughter would return to us. Looking back, I wish we had confronted her then. I wish we had made her see what she was doing. But we didn't. And that silence allowed things to get much, much worse. If you're still with me, thank you for listening. I know this isn't an easy story to hear. Sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who can hurt us the deepest. If you're finding any value in my story, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us share these real-life lessons with others who might be going through something similar. Now let me tell you about the moment everything truly changed. The point of no return that led us to that fateful wedding day. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Sienna called and asked to come over for dinner. I was surprised. It had been weeks since she'd voluntarily spent time with us. I immediately started planning a special meal, hoping this meant she was coming back to us somehow. Maybe she's had a change of heart, I told George as I prepared her favorite lasagna. Maybe she wants to talk about the wedding. Include us after all. George just nodded, but I could see the hope in his eyes too. We both missed our daughter desperately. Sienna arrived at 6:30, looking immaculate as always these days. Designer jeans, a silk blouse, her hair perfectly styled. She barely resembled the girl who used to run around our backyard in muddy sneakers. Dinner was awkward. Sienna picked at her food and kept checking her phone. She asked no questions about our lives. When I mentioned that George's mother wasn't feeling well, she barely responded. Finally, as I was clearing the plates, she put her phone down and took a deep breath. So, I wanted to talk to you both about something important, she said, her voice formal, like she was addressing clients instead of her parents. We sat down, both of us leaning forward slightly, eager to hear what she had to say. As you know, the wedding is in 3 months, she continued. And I've been thinking a lot about how everything should go. My heart leapt. Was this it? Was she going to invite us after all? The thing is, she said, not quite meeting our eyes, I think it would be better if you both didn't come to the wedding. The words hung in the air like smoke. I couldn't have heard her correctly. What did you say? George asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I think it would be better if you didn't attend the ceremony or reception, she repeated, clearer this time. Ethan's family, they have expectations. There will be judges and politicians there. CEOs. I can't risk. Well, you know. No, I don't know, I said, my voice shaking. Please explain to me why you don't want your own parents at your wedding. Sienna sighed, as if I was being deliberately obtuse. Mom, the Williamses move in certain circles. They have a reputation to maintain. The wedding is going to be featured in the regional lifestyle magazine. Everything has to be perfect. And we're not perfect enough? George asked. I could see the vein in his temple pulsing, the way it did when he was deeply upset. It's not that, Sienna said quickly. It's just, you wouldn't be comfortable there. You wouldn't know how to act or what to say. It would be awkward for everyone. We know how to behave at a wedding, Sienna, I said, tears welling in my eyes. We've been to plenty. Not like this one, she insisted. This isn't like Cousin Tim's backyard wedding with the cash bar and the DJ playing the chicken dance. This is a sophisticated event. Each word felt like a slap. Our daughter wasn't just excluding us. She was actively looking down on us, on our entire extended family, on the life we'd built. "So you're ashamed of us," George said flatly. It wasn't a question. Sienna had the grace to look uncomfortable, at least. "I'm not ashamed. I've worked so hard to build this life, this connection to Ethan's world. I can't jeopardize that. The life we helped you build," I reminded her. "With our support, our money, our encouragement. And I'm grateful for that," she said quickly. "I am. But this is my future we're talking about. Being part of the Williams family means connections, opportunities one could never have otherwise. What about being part of the Peterson family?" George asked. "Does that mean nothing to you anymore?" Sienna looked down at her manicured nails. "Of course it does. But this is bigger than that. This is about who I'm becoming, not where I came from." The conversation continued for another painful hour. Sienna trying to justify her decision. George and I trying to understand how our daughter could cut us out of one of the most important days of her life. In the end, we were at an impasse. "I love you both," she said as she was leaving, the words sounding hollow after everything else she'd said. "And I'll send you photos, I promise. You'll feel like you were there." After she left, George and I sat in silence for a long time. The pain was so deep I could physically feel it, like a weight pressing on my chest. "What did we do wrong?" George finally asked, his voice broken in a way I'd never heard before. "Nothing," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure. "We gave her everything we could." "Maybe that was the problem," he said. "Maybe we gave too much." We went to bed that night without resolving anything. What could we say? Our daughter had made her decision. She didn't want us at her wedding, and nothing we could say would change her mind. The next morning, I was still in my robe, nursing a cup of coffee and my broken heart, when the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. "Hello, Mrs. Peterson? This is Margot Campbell from the Rosewood Estate." I recognized the name immediately. The Rosewood Estate was Sienna's dream wedding venue, an historic mansion with sprawling gardens that had been featured in bridal magazines. We had paid the $10,000 deposit months ago. "Yes, this is Linda," I said. "I'm calling about your daughter's wedding. There seems to be some confusion about the payment for the additional services requested." I frowned. "What additional services?" "The vintage champagne fountain, the imported flowers from Holland, the custom ice sculpture. Sienna assured us you would be covering these costs, but we haven't received the deposit yet. The total comes to an additional $22,500 on top of what you've already paid." My hands began to shake so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. $22,000? For flowers and ice sculptures? "I'm sorry," I said slowly, "but this is the first I'm hearing about any of this." "Oh," Margot sounded surprised. "Sienna specifically told us that her parents, you and your husband, had agreed to cover all wedding expenses, and that we should contact you directly about any outstanding payments," she said, and I quote, "My parents insist on giving me the perfect day, no matter the cost." The realization hit me hard. Our daughter had cut us out of her wedding, but was still expecting us to pay for it. Not just pay for it, pay for extravagant additions we knew nothing about. "Mrs. Campbell," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "can you tell me something? When my husband and I paid the venue deposit, did Sienna tell you we would be attending the wedding?" There was an uncomfortable pause. "Actually, Mrs. Peterson, Sienna made it quite clear that you and your husband would not be attending. She said there had been a family disagreement. But she assured us that despite this, you were still committed to funding the event." It was in that moment, standing in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear, that something inside me fundamentally changed. The hurt didn't disappear. No, it was still there, sharp and throbbing. But alongside it grew something else. A clarity I hadn't felt before. A resolve. "Mrs. Campbell," I said, "I'd like to schedule a meeting with you as soon as possible. There are some things about my daughter's wedding that need to be discussed in person." "Of course," she replied. "Would tomorrow at 10 a.m. work for you?" "Yes," I said. "My husband and I will both be there." When I hung up the phone and told George what had happened, I expected him to be as angry as I was. Instead, he just looked sad. "She really doesn't see us as people anymore, does she?" he said quietly. "Just ATMs she can use and then hide away." That night, we had the longest, most serious conversation of our marriage. About Sienna, about what we'd given her, about what we owed her as parents, and what we didn't owe her. About respect and love, and whether one could truly exist without the other. By morning, we had made our decision. A difficult one, but one we both believed was necessary. Not just for our own dignity, but for Sienna's character. If our daughter didn't want us at her wedding, that was her choice to make. But if she thought she could cut us out of her life, while simultaneously using our money to impress people who would never know we existed, well, that was where we had to draw the line. The next day, dressed in our best clothes, George and I walked into the Rosewood estate to meet with Margot Campbell. What we learned in that meeting, and the decision we made afterward, would set in motion the events that would ultimately lead to that fateful wedding day. I hope you're still with me, because what happened next changed everything. For Sienna, for us, and for all those high society guests who had no idea what they were about to witness. If this story is resonating with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means everything to an old woman sharing her life lessons. The Rosewood estate was even more impressive in person than it had looked in the brochures Sienna had shown us months ago. A sprawling white mansion set on 20 acres of manicured gardens, with a circular driveway and fountains that probably cost more to maintain in a month than our mortgage payment. As George and I walked up the grand steps to the main entrance, I couldn't help but feel out of place. My best dress, a navy blue number I'd worn to my nephew's college graduation, suddenly felt woefully inadequate. George kept tugging at his tie, a nervous habit he'd had since our own wedding day 30 years ago. Margot Campbell met us in the foyer. She was exactly what you'd expect from someone who managed high-end weddings, impeccably dressed, with a professional smile and a tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. "Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, thank you for coming," she said, leading us to a small but elegant conference room. "Can I offer you some coffee or tea?" We both declined, too nervous to drink anything. Once we were seated, Margot opened a folder and began going through the details of Sienna's wedding plans. What she revealed made my jaw drop. The simple, elegant affair Sienna had described to us was actually a lavish spectacle that would rival a royal wedding. 200 guests, a 10-piece orchestra, a 5-course dinner with wine pairings, custom-built pergolas for the ceremony, imported roses flown in from Ecuador, hand-calligraphed place cards. The list went on, and the cost, nearly $175,000 in total. We had already paid $62,000, but according to Margot's records, Sienna had authorized an additional $113,000 in upgrades and additions, all to be billed to us. "As you can see," Margot said, sliding a detailed invoice across the table, "these are the outstanding amounts we need to secure before the event date." Sienna assured us that you would be handling all financial aspects directly. George and I exchanged a look. We had emptied our savings, taken out loans, even dipped into our retirement funds to give Sienna the wedding we thought she wanted. But this was impossible. We didn't have another $100,000. No one in our family had ever spent that kind of money on anything, let alone a single day's event. "Mrs. Campbell," I said carefully, "my daughter told us she wasn't inviting us to the wedding, that it would be better if we weren't there." Margot's professional demeanor slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine surprise. I see. She did mention you wouldn't be attending, but she said it was due to a family disagreement. I had no idea. And yet, George added, his voice tight with controlled emotion, she still expected us to pay for everything, without even telling us about these additional costs. "I'm very sorry," Margot said, and I could tell she meant it. "This is unusual, to say the least. Can you tell us something, Mrs. Campbell?" I asked. "What has Sienna told you about us? About her family?" Margot hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm not sure it's my place." "Please," I said. "We need to know." She sighed. "Sienna told us that her parents, meaning you, owned several successful businesses and properties across the state. She said you were very private people who preferred to stay out of the spotlight, which is why you wouldn't be attending. She mentioned that you had connections to several prominent families and had hosted events here before. None of it was true. Not a single word." "Mrs. Campbell," George said slowly, "I've worked at the same factory for 35 years. My wife cleans houses and does bookkeeping for small businesses. We live in a 3-bedroom ranch-style home that still has the original carpet from 1992. We've never hosted an event here or anywhere like it." Margot's face fell. "I see. Our daughter is ashamed of us," I said, the words cutting my throat like glass. "She's created a fictional version of her family to impress her fiancé and his family. And now she expects us to bankrupt ourselves for a wedding we're not even invited to. The room fell silent. Margot looked genuinely distressed, caught in the middle of a family drama she hadn't signed up for. What would happen? George asked finally, if the remaining balance wasn't paid? Margot straightened, back on professional ground. Well, according to our contract, all services require payment in full 2 weeks before the event date. Without payment, we would be forced to cancel. George and I looked at each other again, a silent conversation passing between us. 30 years of marriage means you can say a lot without words. We need some time to discuss this, I told Margot. Can we let you know our decision in a day or two? Of course, she said, gathering her papers. I understand this is complicated. Take whatever time you need. As we walked back to our car, neither of us spoke. The weight of what we'd learned, and what we might do about it, was too heavy for casual conversation. That night, after a quiet dinner, we sat on our back porch, watching the sunset the way we often did when we needed to think. We could take out another loan, George suggested, though I could hear in his voice that he didn't think it was the right answer. We'd be in debt until we die, I said. We'd have to sell the house, work well past retirement age. She's still our daughter, he said softly. Despite everything. Yes, I agreed. But does that mean we let her use us this way? Let her be ashamed of us publicly while taking our money privately? We talked for hours, weighing our love against our dignity, our responsibility as parents against our responsibility to ourselves. By midnight, we had made our decision. A painful one, but necessary. The next morning, I called Margot Campbell and asked for another meeting. This time, when we arrived at the Rosewood estate, we brought all of our paperwork, the contracts, the receipts for what we'd already paid, everything. Mrs. Campbell, I said once we were seated in the same conference room, my husband and I have made a decision. We will not be paying any additional costs for Sienna's wedding. Margot nodded slowly. I understand. Given the circumstances, that's completely reasonable. I'll need to inform Sienna immediately that she'll need to either scale back her plans or find alternative funding. There's something else, George added. We want to know what our rights are as the current contractual clients. Since our names and credit card are on all the paperwork, and we've paid all deposits so far, what control do we have over this event? Margot looked surprised. Well, legally speaking, you are the clients of record. The contracts are in your names. That means you have final say over all aspects of the event, including guest list, vendors, menu, everything. And if we wanted to cancel the event entirely? I asked, my heart pounding. You would lose your deposits, but you have that right, she confirmed. Though I hope it wouldn't come to that. It won't, I assured her. But we do want to make some changes to the arrangements. Over the next hour, George and I laid out our new plan. We weren't going to cancel Sienna's wedding. We weren't that cruel. But we were going to make some significant adjustments. No imported flowers. No custom ice sculptures. No champagne fountain. A reasonable, beautiful wedding that reflected the values we had tried to instill in our daughter. The values she seemed to have forgotten in her quest to impress the Williams family. And one more thing, I said as we were finishing up. We want to add 2 names to the guest list. Margot looked up from her notes. Whose names? Ours, George said firmly. Linda and George Peterson. Margot's eyebrows shot up. But Sienna specifically said, We're paying for this wedding, I interrupted gently. And we're her parents. We will be there. Very well, Margot said, making a note. I'll update the guest list. As we left the Rosewood estate for the second time, I felt both terrified and empowered. We had finally stood up for ourselves, but I knew Sienna would be furious when she found out we'd scaled back her grand plans. I was right. The phone call came less than an hour after we got home. Sienna's name flashing on the screen like a warning. What did you do? She demanded the moment I answered, not bothering with a greeting. Margot Campbell just called me saying all my special requests have been canceled, that the wedding is being scaled back. How could you do this to me? Sienna, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, we simply couldn't afford what you were asking for. You never even told us about these additional expenses. I knew you wouldn't understand, she cried. This is the most important day of my life. The Williamses expect a certain level of sophistication. We've already spent over $60,000, George said, his voice firm. He was standing next to me, listening on speakerphone. That's more than we spent on your entire college education. That's nothing for a wedding like this. Sienna shot back. Ethan's cousin had $1 million wedding in Aspen last year. Then perhaps Ethan's family should be paying for your wedding, I suggested. There was a pause. They can't. There were some investment issues last quarter. But that's beside the point. The point is you're ruining everything. It was in that moment that I truly understood what had happened to my daughter. She wasn't just trying to impress the Williamses. She was trying to rescue them financially by marrying Ethan. The old money family wasn't so wealthy after all, and Sienna was positioning herself as their financial savior, using our money. Sienna, I said slowly, we've made our decision. The wedding will still be beautiful, but it will be within our means. Fine, she spat. Then I'll just have to find the money somewhere else. There's one more thing, George added. Your mother and I will be attending the wedding. The silence that followed was deafening. No, Sienna finally said, her voice ice cold. Absolutely not. I've already told everyone my parents won't be there. I can't suddenly produce you out of nowhere. You won't have to, I said. Because we were never gone. We've always been right here, Sienna. Your real parents. Not the fictional wealthy entrepreneurs you've been describing to your fiancé's family. Another long silence. You don't understand what's at stake here, Sienna finally said, her voice breaking slightly. If the Williamses find out I lied, if they see where I really come from, then what? George asked. They won't let their son marry you? Is that the kind of family you want to join? People who would reject you because of where you come from. You don't understand anything about their world, Sienna insisted. About the world I'm trying to build for myself. Maybe not, I conceded. But we understand integrity, and respect, and family loyalty. All things we thought we taught you. The conversation ended badly, with Sienna hanging up after declaring she would find a way to fix what we'd ruined. We didn't hear from her for days afterward. Meanwhile, we learned from Margot Campbell that Sienna had been frantically trying to secure additional funding for the wedding. She'd applied for credit cards, approached other family members, even tried to convince the Rosewood estate to extend her credit based on future earnings from her catering business. A week before the wedding, the situation became even more complicated. Ethan's mother, Victoria Williams, called the venue to discuss some details and learned that the event had been significantly scaled back. Confused, she called Sienna, who apparently spun some story about unexpected business losses suffered by her wealthy parents. Victoria, apparently not one to take things at face value, did some digging. She called the venue again and learned that the contracts were in the names of George and Linda Peterson. A simple internet search would have shown her exactly who we were. Not wealthy entrepreneurs, but a factory worker and a bookkeeper from the modest side of town. What Victoria did with that information, we didn't know at the time. But the pressure on Sienna must have been intense, because 3 days before the wedding, she showed up at our door, looking more stressed than I'd ever seen her. We need to talk, she said, pushing past me into the living room without waiting for an invitation. She looked terrible, beautiful as always, but with dark circles under her eyes and a tightness to her mouth that spoke of sleepless nights. Ethan's mother has been asking questions, she said without preamble. About you. About our family. George and I exchanged glances but said nothing. I need you to do something for me, Sienna continued. If you insist on coming to the wedding, I need you to pretend. Pretend what? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Pretend to be the people I've described to them, she said, not meeting our eyes. Dress the part. Talk about your businesses, your properties. Just for one day. The request was so outrageous, so deeply hurtful, that for a moment I couldn't speak. You want us to lie, George said flatly. To pretend we're not who we are. Just for one day, Sienna repeated. Please. Everything is falling apart. Ethan is asking questions I can't answer. His mother is suspicious. If they find out I've been lying this whole time, then what? I asked. What exactly do you think would happen, Sienna? She finally looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. They wouldn't accept me. The wedding would be called off. I'd lose everything I've worked for. If Ethan truly loves you, I said gently, your background won't matter to him. Sienna laughed, a bitter sound I'd never heard from her before. That's not how their world works, Mom. Love isn't enough. Status matters. Connections matter. Money matters. Then maybe it's not a world worth joining, George suggested. Sienna's expression hardened. It's my choice to make. And I've made it. I want this life. I want to be a Williams. And I need your help to make that happen. George and I looked at each other again, another silent conversation passing between us. "We won't lie for you, Sienna," I said finally. "We won't pretend to be people we're not. We've worked hard our whole lives, honest jobs that put food on the table and clothes on your back. We're not ashamed of who we are, even if you are." "Fine," she said, standing up abruptly. "Then don't come. Stay away from my wedding. I'll handle this myself." As she stormed toward the door, George called after her. "Sienna, wait. Think about what you're doing. Think about the foundation you're building your marriage on." She paused at the door, her back to us. For a moment, I thought she might turn around, might realize the mistake she was making. But then her shoulders straightened, and she walked out without another word. That night, we received an email from the Rosewood estate. Sienna had attempted to change the contracts to her name, to remove us as the clients of record. But without our signatures, the venue couldn't make the change. We were still legally the ones in control of the event, which meant we had a decision to make. A final one. Would we attend our daughter's wedding, knowing she didn't want us there? Would we expose her lies to her new family? Or would we stay away, allowing her to continue the deception? The answer came to us the next morning, when we received a text message from an unknown number. It was a screenshot of a conversation between Sienna and someone else, presumably Ethan. In it, Sienna was saying, "Don't worry, I've handled my parents. They won't be a problem. And we'll have the wedding exactly as planned. They'll never know where the money really came from." The person who sent us the screenshot added only, "Thought you should see this. Not everyone in the Williams family approves of deception." It was clear then what we had to do. Not out of vengeance, but out of tough love. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the most necessary ones. Are you still with me? I know this is getting intense, but I promise the most incredible part is still to come. If you're finding value in this story, please hit that subscribe button. Every new subscriber helps this channel grow and allows us to share more real-life experiences like this one. Because what happened on Sienna's wedding day wasn't just shocking. It was the beginning of something none of us could have anticipated. The day before Sienna's wedding was one of the longest of my life. George and I sat at our kitchen table, that mysterious text message still open on my phone between us. "What do we do now?" George asked, running his hands through his thinning hair. "Do we confront her? Do we go to the wedding anyway? Do we just let it happen?" I didn't have answers. Part of me wanted to rush to my daughter, shake her by the shoulders, and demand she come back to her senses. Another part wanted to protect her, even now, from the consequences of her actions. And a small, wounded part of me wanted to let her fail, to learn the hard way what happens when you build a life on lies. I think," I said slowly, "we need more information before we decide." George nodded. Agreed. That afternoon, we drove back to the Rosewood estate. We hadn't scheduled an appointment, but Margot Campbell saw us in her office anyway. She looked stressed, with dark circles under her eyes not unlike Sienna's. "Mr. and Mrs. Peterson," she said, gesturing for us to sit down. "I'm afraid there have been some developments since we last spoke." "What kind of developments?" George asked. Margot sighed. "Sienna has been here every day this week, making changes to the wedding plans. She somehow managed to reinstate many of the expensive elements we canceled. The champagne fountain, the imported flowers, the ice sculpture. But how?" I asked. "We didn't authorize any of that." "That's just it," Margot said, looking uncomfortable. "She brought in new vendors under new contracts. She's paying them directly, bypassing our usual process." "Where did she get that kind of money?" George wondered aloud. Margot hesitated. "I'm not certain I should be sharing this, but given the circumstances." Sienna told our staff that she'd secured a business loan against future catering contracts. But one of our bartenders overheard her on the phone yesterday, talking about selling her engagement ring and replacing it with a replica after the wedding. My blood ran cold. "She's planning to sell her ring? Does Ethan know?" "I don't believe so," Margot said. "And there's something else. The Williams family has been calling with questions. Very specific questions about you both. About your businesses, your properties. Mrs. Williams even asked for the name of your estate manager." George and I exchanged glances. The lie was unraveling, and Sienna was growing desperate. "There's one more thing," Margot added, reaching into her desk drawer. "This was delivered this morning for the bride. It's standard procedure for us to log all deliveries, but the courier said it was confidential." Still, I thought you should know about it. She handed us a receipt for a courier package. The sender was listed as Premier Rentals, and the description simply read jewelry delivery. She's getting a fake ring, I whispered, to replace the real one she's planning to sell. We thanked Margot and left, more troubled than ever. In the car, George turned to me. I think we need to talk to Ethan, he said. He deserves to know what he's getting into. I nodded slowly. But how? We don't even have his phone number. No, George agreed. But we know where he'll be tonight. The rehearsal dinner was being held at the Wellington, an upscale restaurant downtown. We hadn't been invited, of course, but we knew the time and place from the wedding itinerary Margot had shared with us. That evening, dressed in our best clothes, we parked across the street from the Wellington and waited. The dinner was scheduled to end at 9:30. At 9:45, guests began to emerge. We spotted Ethan immediately, tall and handsome in a tailored suit, laughing with what appeared to be his parents. Sienna was nowhere to be seen. Now's our chance, George said. We approached Ethan as he was saying goodbye to an older couple. When he turned and saw us, confusion flickered across his face. Can I help you? He asked politely. Ethan, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We're Linda and George Peterson, Sienna's parents. His confusion deepened. I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. Sienna's parents passed away when she was young. She was raised by distant relatives. Even though I knew the lie, hearing it directly from his mouth felt like a physical blow. No, Ethan, George said gently. We are Sienna's parents, her biological parents. We raised her from birth. Ethan stared at us, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. That's not possible. Sienna told me. She lied, I said simply. She's been lying to you about many things, and we think you deserve to know the truth before tomorrow. He looked around, seemingly checking if anyone was watching this interaction. Look, I don't know what this is about, but this isn't the place. My parents are right over there. We understand, George said. But this is important. Your entire future depends on it. Something in George's tone must have resonated, because Ethan hesitated, then nodded. Fine. There's a coffee shop around the corner. We can talk there for a few minutes. The coffee shop was nearly empty at that hour. We sat at a table in the back, away from the windows. Ethan kept checking his phone, clearly uncomfortable. Make this quick, he said. Sienna's with the wedding planner finalizing some details. She'll be looking for me soon. Ethan, I began. Everything Sienna has told you about her background is a lie. We're not wealthy entrepreneurs with multiple businesses. I'm a bookkeeper, and George works at the Peterson manufacturing plant. No relation, just a coincidence. We live in a modest home on the east side of town. We've worked hard all our lives, but we're not the kind of people Sienna has described to you. Ethan's expression was unreadable. And why should I believe you instead of my fiancé? George reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. From it, he extracted a worn photograph of the three of us. Sienna at her high school graduation, standing between George and me in front of our home. The house was clearly visible in the background, modest, well-maintained, but certainly not the mansion Sienna had described. This is our daughter, George said. This is our home. This is the truth. Ethan stared at the photo for a long time. This doesn't prove anything, he said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. We can show you her birth certificate, I offered. School records. Family albums. We have 26 years of proof, Ethan. He sat back, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Why would she lie about something like this? Because she's ashamed of us, I said, the words still painful to speak aloud. Because she wanted to fit into your world, your family's world. She didn't think we were good enough. Ethan was quiet for a moment. And you're telling me this the night before our wedding because? Because there's more, George said. The wedding you think you're getting tomorrow? The one with imported flowers and custom ice sculptures and vintage champagne? We're not paying for any of that. We scaled back the plans last week because we couldn't afford it. My parents are covering most of the wedding costs, Ethan said, but he sounded uncertain. No, they're not, I said gently. According to the venue, all deposits came from us, and Sienna has been secretly arranging new vendors to restore the expensive elements we canceled. With what money? Ethan asked. I hesitated, then decided he deserved the full truth. We believe she's planning to sell her engagement ring, the one you gave her, and replace it with a replica. The color drained from Ethan's face. That's not possible. That ring has been in my family for 3 generations. My grandmother gave it to me specifically for Sienna. I'm sorry, George said. But we have reason to believe it's true. Ethan stood abruptly. I need to go. I need to talk to Sienna. We understand, I said. But please, think carefully about the foundation you're building your marriage on. If Sienna has been lying about something as fundamental as who she is and where she comes from. I said I need to go, Ethan repeated, his voice hard. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the coffee shop. George and I sat there for a long time afterward, neither of us speaking. Had we done the right thing? Had we just ruined our daughter's chance at happiness? Or had we saved a young man from making a terrible mistake? We drove home in silence, both lost in our thoughts. I kept replaying the conversation with Ethan in my mind, wondering if we could have handled it differently, if we should have stayed out of it completely. We were about to go to bed when my phone rang. It was nearly midnight. The screen showed Sienna's name. I answered with a racing heart. Sienna. How could you? She screamed, her voice so full of rage I barely recognized it. How could you? Sienna, calm down, I said. What's happening? As if you don't know, she shouted. You went to Ethan. You told him everything. You ruined everything. In the background, I could hear crashing sounds, like things being thrown or broken. We just thought he deserved to know the truth, George said. He was standing next to me now, listening. The truth. Sienna laughed, a high, hysterical sound that sent chills down my spine. The truth is you've always been jealous of me. You've always wanted to keep me down at your level. You couldn't stand that I was finally escaping, finally becoming something more than a Peterson. Her words cut deep, but I tried to stay calm. That's not true, Sienna. We've only ever wanted you to be happy. But happiness built on lies isn't real happiness. Spare me your fortune cookie wisdom, she spat. Ethan just left my hotel room. He says he needs time to think. The day before our wedding. Do you have any idea what you've done? We've given him the chance to make an informed decision, George said. If he truly loves you, your background won't matter. That's not how the real world works. Sienna shouted. You live in your pathetic little bubble where love conquers all and honesty is the best policy. The real world runs on appearances and connections and money. If that's the world you want to live in, I said quietly, then I feel sorry for you, Sienna. Save your pity, she hissed. The wedding is still happening tomorrow. I've explained everything to Ethan. I told him you're delusional, that you've always been jealous of my success, that you're trying to sabotage my happiness because you can't stand to see me rise above my origins. My heart sank. And he believed that. There was a pause, just a beat too long. Of course he did. He loves me, which is more than I can say for you too. We do love you, Sienna, George said, his voice breaking. That's why we can't stand by and watch you destroy yourself like this. The only thing being destroyed is your relationship with me, she said coldly. After tomorrow, you are dead to me. I never want to see or speak to either of you again. I hope you're happy with what you've done. The line went dead. George and I stood there, the silence of our home pressing in around us. It was the moment every parent dreads. The moment when you realize that despite all your love and effort, you've lost your child. Not to death or distance, but to something worse. To a fundamental disconnect of values. To a rejection so complete it leaves no room for reconciliation. What do we do now? George whispered. I didn't have an answer. For the first time in my life, I had no idea what the right thing was anymore. We went to bed but didn't sleep. How could we? Our daughter had just declared us dead to her. The child we had raised, loved, sacrificed for. She wanted nothing more to do with us. Around 3 a.m., my phone pinged with a text message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Peterson? This is Victoria Williams, Ethan's mother. We need to talk. Can you meet me at the Rosewood Estate tomorrow at 9 a.m.? It's urgent. I showed the message to George, who was also wide awake. What do you think she wants? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. But I think we have to go. We arrived at the Rosewood Estate the next morning, exhausted and emotionally drained. Victoria Williams was waiting for us in the same conference room where we'd met with Margot Campbell. Victoria was exactly what I'd expected, elegant, poised, with the kind of confidence that comes from a lifetime of privilege. But her eyes were red-rimmed, and she looked as tired as we felt. Thank you for coming, she said, gesturing for us to sit. I apologize for the early hour, but the ceremony is scheduled for 2 p.m., and there are things we need to discuss. Of course, I said. What can we do for you, Mrs. Williams? Please call me Victoria. She took a deep breath. My son came home very upset last night after meeting with you. He told me everything you said about Sienna, about her background, about the lies. It's all true, George said. We can prove it. Victoria held up a hand. That won't be necessary. I believe you. I blinked in surprise. You do? I've had suspicions about Sienna for some time, she admitted. Her stories never quite added up. And then when I learned that the wedding contracts were in your names. Well, I did some research of my own. And what did you find? George asked. Exactly what you told Ethan. That you're not wealthy entrepreneurs with multiple properties. That you're hard-working, middle-class people who have done your best for your daughter. She gave us a small, sad smile. There's no shame in that. In fact, I respect it far more than what Sienna has been claiming. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched. That means a lot. The problem, Victoria continued, is that Ethan is confused and heartbroken. He loves Sienna, or at least he loves the person he thought she was. Finding out she's been lying about something so fundamental has shaken him deeply. Is he going to call off the wedding? George asked. Victoria sighed. He doesn't know what to do. When he confronted Sienna last night, she broke down crying, said she only lied because she was afraid of losing him, that she knew how important family background was to us. She managed to turn it around so that Ethan actually felt guilty for making her feel insecure. She's always been good at that, I murmured. Indeed, Victoria said dryly. She's quite persuasive. This morning, Ethan told me he's decided to go through with the wedding. He says love is more important than background, that he doesn't care where Sienna comes from. That's actually very sweet of him, I said, surprised. It would be, Victoria agreed, if that were the only lie. But it's not, is it? I looked down at my hands. No, it's not. The ring? Victoria asked quietly. George nodded. We have reason to believe she's planning to sell it and replace it with a fake. Victoria closed her eyes briefly, as if in pain. That ring belonged to my grandmother. It's been in our family for generations. The sentimental value far outweighs the monetary worth. We're so sorry, I said. It's not your fault, Victoria assured me. But it does complicate things. Ethan is willing to forgive the lies about her background. But if he finds out about the ring, I'm not sure there's coming back from that. So what are you suggesting? George asked. Victoria straightened her shoulders. I want to stop this wedding. Not because Sienna comes from a modest background. I genuinely don't care about that. But because she's demonstrated a pattern of deception that makes her unfit to join our family. I felt a strange mixture of relief and heartbreak. Relief that Victoria saw the situation clearly. Heartbreak that it had come to this. What can we do to help? I asked. You control the venue contract, Victoria reminded us. You could cancel the event entirely. George and I looked at each other. Could we really do that? Stop our daughter's wedding on the day itself? The thought was almost unimaginable. Or, Victoria continued, seeing our hesitation, you could simply be there. Be present. Force Sienna to acknowledge you as her parents in front of everyone. She'd never forgive us, I whispered. Perhaps not, Victoria conceded. But sometimes the right choice isn't the easy one. As we left that meeting, George and I felt the weight of an impossible decision bearing down on us. Stop the wedding entirely? Show up uninvited? Do nothing and let our daughter marry a man she'd been deceiving from the start? There were no good options. Only painful ones. If you're still with me, thank you for listening. I know this story is taking some difficult turns. Sometimes in life, we face choices with no clear right answer, only different kinds of wrong. If you're finding any value in this journey, please hit that subscribe button. Your support means so much as I share these difficult moments from my past. Now let me tell you about the darkest hours of this whole experience, and the moment everything changed. The day of Sienna's wedding dawned bright and clear. One of those perfect June days that seem made for celebrations. George and I had barely slept, the weight of our decision hanging over us like a storm cloud. We should get ready, George said around 10 a.m. If we're going to do this, we should look our best. I nodded, though my heart wasn't in it. I pulled out the navy blue dress I'd bought specifically for the wedding months ago, back when I still believed I'd be watching my only daughter walk down the aisle. George took his best suit from the closet, also purchased for this occasion. As I applied my makeup with trembling hands, I kept thinking about Sienna as a little girl. The way she would sit on the bathroom counter watching me get ready for work, asking to try my lipstick. How she would twirl in her flower girl dress before her cousin's wedding, so excited to scatter rose petals down the aisle. Where had that sweet girl gone? When had she turned into someone who could lie so easily, who could dismiss her own parents as if we were nothing? Are we doing the right thing? I asked George as he struggled with his tie. Maybe we should just stay away. Let her have her day. George met my eyes in the mirror. And let her continue this deception? Let her marry that young man without him knowing the full truth about who he's marrying? Could you live with that? I couldn't answer. Either choice felt wrong. Either choice would hurt someone. We were just about to leave when my phone rang. It was Margot Campbell from the Rosewood estate. "Mrs. Peterson," she said, her voice tense. "I thought you should know that there's been a development. Sienna is here, and she's making some unusual demands." "What kind of demands?" I asked, putting the phone on speaker so George could hear. "She's insisting that the staff confiscate all phones at the entrance to the ceremony. She says it's to maintain the sanctity of the moment. But it's not something we've ever done before. And she's stationed 2 of her friends at the entrance with a guest list, checking IDs to ensure no uninvited guests enter." My heart sank. She was trying to ensure we couldn't get in, couldn't disrupt her perfect day. "Is that all?" George asked. "No," Margot sighed. "She's also demanding that we remove your names from all payment records and contracts before the reception. She says if any guests see your names, she'll sue the venue for breach of privacy." "Can she do that?" I asked. "No," Margot assured us. "The contracts are legally binding. Your names stay on them. But she's creating quite a scene, threatening staff, making the wedding party uncomfortable. The Williams family looks especially distressed. I thought about Victoria Williams and her quiet dignity, about Ethan's confusion and pain. "We'll be there soon," I told Margot. "Please don't change any documents." When we hung up, George looked at me with determination in his eyes. "We have to go. Not just for us, but for Ethan too. He deserves to know what he's getting into." We arrived at the Rosewood estate at noon, 2 hours before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. The place was bustling with activity, florists arranging last-minute bouquets, catering staff setting up tables, the string quartet warming up on the lawn. We parked some distance away, not wanting to be spotted immediately. As we walked toward the main building, I felt like an intruder, which was ridiculous, since we were the ones who had paid for most of this lavish affair. Margot met us at a side entrance, looking harried. "Thank goodness you're here. Things have escalated. Sienna is threatening to fire the entire catering staff because they won't remove your names from the billing information." "Where is she now?" George asked. "In the bridal suite with her bridesmaids. And Mrs. Peterson, she has the ring. I saw her showing it to her maid of honor, discussing how much she could get for it after the ceremony." My stomach dropped. So it was true. She was planning to sell the family heirloom. "What about Ethan?" I asked. "He's in the groom's suite with his groomsmen. He looks troubled. His mother has been trying to speak with him privately all morning, but Sienna has arranged for him to be constantly surrounded by people." "And the Williams family?" George asked. "Mr. Williams looks like he's about to have a heart attack from the stress. Mrs. Williams is maintaining her composure, but barely. The rest of their family is picking up on the tension. Everyone knows something is wrong, but no one knows exactly what." I took a deep breath. "Margot, as the legal clients for this event, do we have the right to stop it?" She hesitated. "Yes, technically you do. But Mrs. Peterson, stopping a wedding in progress, it would be dramatic, to say the least. Are you sure that's what you want to do?" Was it what I wanted? Of course not. What mother wants to stop her daughter's wedding? But what was the alternative? Let her marry a man she'd been lying to from the start? Let her sell his family's heirloom ring? Let her continue building her life on a foundation of deception? "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I need to speak with Victoria Williams before I decide." Margot nodded. "She's in the main garden, ostensibly checking the flower arrangements, but I think she's just trying to collect herself." We thanked Margot and made our way to the garden. The Rosewood Estate's gardens were truly spectacular. Roses in full bloom, perfectly manicured hedges, a marble fountain glistening in the sunlight. Under different circumstances, it would have been the perfect setting for a wedding. We found Victoria standing alone by a trellis of climbing roses, looking elegant but strained in a pale blue suit. "Linda, George," she said when she saw us. "I wasn't sure you'd come. We're still not sure what we're going to do," George admitted. Stopping the wedding seems extreme. Victoria nodded. I thought the same thing until this morning. But there have been developments. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, opening a text message. This is from my sister, who overheard Sienna on the phone with someone in the bridal suite. She handed me the phone. The message read, "You won't believe what I just heard. S telling someone named Jax that she's 90% sure E's family is broke, but that marrying into the Williams name is still worth it for the connections. Said she'll squeeze whatever's left out of them before moving on. V, this girl is bad news." I handed the phone to George, feeling sick. Sienna wasn't just lying to impress the Williams family. She was actively planning to use them, to extract whatever value she could from them before moving on. There's more, Victoria said grimly. She showed us another text, this one with a photo attached. It was a screenshot of what appeared to be a jewelry appraisal, with Ethan's family ring clearly visible. She's already had the ring appraised. She knows exactly what it's worth. Does Ethan know any of this? George asked. Not yet, Victoria said. I've been trying to get him alone all morning, but Sienna has him surrounded. And without concrete proof of her intentions regarding the ring, I'm afraid he'll just think I'm being a controlling mother who doesn't want him to marry the girl he loves. I understood her dilemma completely. Without irrefutable evidence, anything we said would sound like interference, like we were trying to sabotage the wedding out of spite. We need proof, I said. Something Sienna can't explain away. Victoria nodded. Exactly. But the ceremony starts in less than 2 hours, and once they exchange vows, the ring will be legally hers, George finished. And there's nothing anyone can do about it. We stood there in silence, each lost in thought. The situation seemed impossible. Stop the wedding without concrete proof, and we'd be the villains of the story. Do nothing, and allow a marriage founded on lies to proceed. I have an idea, I said finally. But it's risky, and you might not like it. I explained my plan to Victoria and George. It wasn't perfect. It might not even work. But it was the only option I could see that might bring the truth to light before it was too late. Victoria listened intently, then nodded. I'm willing to try it, for my son's sake. We spent the next hour putting our plan into motion, each of us taking on a different task. Victoria would try once more to get Ethan alone. George would speak with Margot about certain technical arrangements. And I would do perhaps the hardest thing of all. I would confront my daughter one last time. I found Sienna in the bridal suite, surrounded by her bridesmaids. She looked stunning in her wedding gown, a custom design that had cost more than our first car. Her hair was swept up elegantly, her makeup flawless. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale. When she saw me in the doorway, her expression froze. What are you doing here? She demanded. How did you get past security? I need to speak with my daughter, I said calmly. Alone, please. The bridesmaids looked confused, glancing between Sienna and me. They didn't know who I was. Sienna had probably told them some version of her orphan story. Everyone out, Sienna commanded. Now, the girls filed out, still looking confused. When the last one closed the door behind her, Sienna turned to me, fury in her eyes. How dare you come here, she hissed. I told you what would happen if you tried to ruin my wedding. I'm not here to ruin anything, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. I'm here to give you one last chance to do the right thing. She laughed, cold and dismissive. The right thing? You mean stay in my place? Accept my station in life. No thank you. I've worked too hard to get here. You've lied too much to get here, I corrected gently. Sienna, it's not too late. You could still tell Ethan the truth. About everything. If he truly loves you, he'll understand. I told him enough of the truth, she said. He knows my parents aren't dead. He knows I exaggerated my background. And guess what? He doesn't care. He loves me anyway. Does he know you're planning to sell his grandmother's ring? I asked quietly. Sienna's face paled slightly before she recovered. I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't lie to me anymore, I said, feeling suddenly exhausted. We know, Sienna. About the appraisal. About your plans after the wedding. About what you said to someone named Jax this morning. Now she looked genuinely alarmed. You've been spying on me? No. But it seems your future mother-in-law has people looking out for her son's interests. I took a step toward her. Sienna, this has gone too far. You're not just bending the truth anymore. You're actively planning to hurt people who care about you. You don't understand anything, she said bitterly. This world runs on appearances and connections. The Williamses might not have as much money as they used to, but they still have the name, the social standing. That's worth something. That's worth everything. And what about love? I asked. What about honesty and trust? The things a marriage should actually be built on. Sienna rolled her eyes. God, you sound like a greeting card. This isn't about love, Mom. It's about securing my future. About finally becoming someone who matters. Her words broke my heart all over again. You've always mattered, Sienna. To us. You didn't have to become someone else to have value. Well, it's too late now, she said, turning back to the mirror to check her makeup. The ceremony starts in an hour. Ethan is waiting. 200 guests are arriving. There's nothing you can do to stop this. I looked at my daughter. This stranger wearing my daughter's face, and felt a profound sadness wash over me. Where had we gone wrong? How had she become so cold, so calculating? I love you, Sienna, I said softly. I always will, no matter what. But I can't stand by and watch you hurt yourself and others this way. Then don't watch, she said dismissively. Leave. Now. Before I call security. I turned to go, pausing at the door. For what it's worth, you look beautiful today. Every bit the bride I always imagined you'd be. For just a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the old Sienna in her eyes. A flash of vulnerability, of the little girl who used to curl up in my lap during thunderstorms. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Goodbye, Mom, she said, turning back to the mirror. It felt final, like she was saying goodbye not just for today, but forever. I left the bridal suite with tears streaming down my face. George was waiting for me in the hallway, his expression asking the question he didn't need to voice. She's not going to stop, I told him. She's going through with it, no matter what. He nodded grimly. Then we proceed with the plan. The next hour passed in a blur of activity and tension. Victoria finally managed to get Ethan alone, though we didn't know what was said between mother and son. George confirmed the technical arrangements with Margot, who looked increasingly uncomfortable with the whole situation, but agreed to do her part. And I found a quiet corner of the garden and cried. For the daughter I had lost. For the family we had been. For the future that now seemed so uncertain. By the time the ceremony was set to begin, I had pulled myself together enough to take my place. Not as the mother of the bride. Sienna had made it clear that role wasn't available to me, but as a silent witness to what was about to unfold. The garden had been transformed for the ceremony. White chairs arranged in neat rows. A flower-covered arch where the couple would exchange vows. The string quartet playing softly as guests took their seats. George and I stood at the back, partly hidden by a large arrangement of lilies. We watched as the Williams family took their places in the front row, Victoria's face a mask of composed dignity. We saw Ethan take his position under the arch, handsome in his tuxedo, but visibly tense. Then the music changed, and everyone turned to watch the bridal procession. First the bridesmaids, then the flower girl and ring bearer. And finally Sienna, walking alone down the aisle. No father to give her away, she had made sure of that. She was radiant, gliding between the rows of chairs with perfect poise. Looking at her, you would never guess the turmoil beneath the surface, the web of lies that had brought us all to this moment. The ceremony began. The officiant spoke about love and commitment, about honesty and trust, words that felt hollow given what we knew. Sienna and Ethan exchanged smiles, though his seemed strained around the edges. Then came the moment of truth. If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, the officiant said, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. This was it, the moment we had planned for. I looked at George, who nodded almost imperceptibly. He pressed a button on his phone. Suddenly, the large decorative screens that had been set up around the garden, ostensibly to display romantic photos of the couple during the reception, flickered to life. But instead of engagement photos, they showed text messages, screenshots, appraisal documents for a diamond ring. And finally, a recording began to play through the venue's sound system. Sienna's voice crystal clear. Once we're married, I'll have access to whatever's left of the Williams money. And if it's really all gone like I suspect, at least I'll have the name. Plus, there's the ring. It's worth at least $50,000. I can sell it after the honeymoon, replace it with a good fake. He'll never know the difference. A male voice. Damn girl. That's cold. Sienna's laugh unmistakable. That's business, Jax. That's how you get ahead in this world. The recording ended, leaving a deadly silence in its wake. Every eye in the garden turned to Sienna, who stood frozen at the altar, her face a mask of shock and horror. Ethan took a step back from her, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding to pain. "It's true, isn't it?" he asked, his voice carrying in the silence. "Everything your parents said. Everything my mother warned me about. It's all true." Sienna seemed to shrink before our eyes. "Ethan, I can explain." "Can you?" he interrupted. "Can you explain why you lied about your background? Why you pretended your parents were dead? Why you were planning to sell my grandmother's ring?" The guests began to murmur, the sound growing like a wave. I saw Victoria Williams rise from her seat, moving toward her son. "I did it for us," Sienna said desperately. "For our future." "No," Ethan said, his voice sad but firm. "You did it for yourself. There is no us, Sienna. There never really was." He removed the ring from his pocket, the one he had been about to place on her finger, and turned away, walking toward his mother, who put her arm around him protectively. Sienna stood alone at the altar, the dream she had constructed so carefully crumbling around her. She turned slowly, scanning the crowd until her eyes found George and me at the back of the garden. The look she gave us contained a lifetime of emotion, rage, betrayal, humiliation, and beneath it all, a flicker of something that might have been understanding. She knew in that moment that we had done what we felt we had to do, not out of malice, but out of love. Love for her, love for truth, love for the values we had tried and failed to instill in her. Without a word, she gathered her gown and walked back down the aisle, alone, head held high despite everything. The guests parted for her like the Red Sea, no one quite knowing what to say or do in the face of such a spectacular collapse. And just like that, it was over. The wedding that never was. The lie that couldn't stand in the light of truth. George and I didn't follow her. What was there to say? We had made our choice, and she had made hers. The gulf between us felt uncrossable. As the guests began to disperse in confused, murmuring groups, Victoria Williams approached us. "Thank you," she said simply. "It wasn't the outcome any of us wanted, but it was the one my son needed." "What will he do now?" I asked. She shrugged slightly. "Heal. Move on. Learn from this." She hesitated, then added, "And what about Sienna? What will happen to her?" It was the question I'd been asking myself since the moment the recording began to play. What would happen to my daughter now? With her grand plan in ruins, her deception exposed, her future suddenly uncertain? "I don't know," I admitted. "But whatever happens, she'll survive. She's always been strong. Too strong for her own good sometimes." Victoria nodded, understanding in her eyes. "And you've lost a daughter today. Had we? Or had we lost her long before this moment, when she first decided that we weren't good enough, that our love wasn't valuable enough, that our name wasn't prestigious enough?" "Maybe," George said, putting his arm around me. "Or maybe someday we'll find her again." We left the Rosewood estate as the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the gardens where our daughter's wedding should have taken place. The day hadn't turned out as anyone had planned. There was no celebration, no joyous union, no new beginning. Instead, there was truth. Painful, necessary truth. As we drove home in silence, I couldn't help wondering if we had done the right thing. Had we been cruel to expose Sienna so publicly? Would a private confrontation have been better? Would she ever forgive us? The house felt emptier than ever when we returned. I changed out of my navy blue dress, the mother of the bride dress that never got to serve its purpose, and hung it in the back of my closet. I didn't have the heart to get rid of it, but I couldn't bear to look at it either. George and I sat on our back porch that evening, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. We didn't speak much. What was there to say? Our daughter had made her choices. We had made ours. The consequences would unfold as they would. "Do you think she'll ever speak to us again?" I asked finally, breaking the heavy silence. George took my hand, his palm warm and familiar against mine. "I don't know, Linda. I hope so. But even if she doesn't, we did what we had to do. For her sake as much as anyone's." Did we? I wondered aloud. Or did we just destroy her chance at happiness out of some misguided sense of moral righteousness? "If her happiness depends on lies and manipulation," George said gently, "then it was never real happiness to begin with. It was an illusion, and illusions always fall apart eventually." I knew he was right, but it didn't ease the ache in my heart. The knowledge that somewhere out there, my daughter was hurting. That I had contributed to that hurt, even if my intentions had been pure. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the day's events in my mind, wondering if there had been another way, a better way. Around 3 a.m., I got up and went to Sienna's old bedroom. We had kept it largely the same since she moved out. The same pale blue walls, the same twin bed with its floral comforter, the same bulletin board covered with photos and mementos from her high school years. I sat on the edge of the bed and picked up the framed photo on the nightstand. Sienna at 16, laughing as she balanced atop the stone wall in our backyard, her arms outstretched as if she could fly. When had that joyful, carefree girl turned into the woman who could lie so easily, who could dismiss her own parents as if we were nothing? What had we missed? What had we failed to teach her? Or had we taught her too well that she could have anything if she worked hard enough for it, without emphasizing that how you achieved your goals mattered as much as achieving them? I sat there until dawn, surrounded by the ghosts of who Sienna had been, mourning the relationship we had lost. When the first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains, I wiped my tears and went downstairs to make coffee. George joined me in the kitchen a little later, his eyes reflecting the same sleepless night I had experienced. I called in sick to work, he said. Didn't feel right to be operating heavy machinery today. I nodded, understanding completely. Neither of us was in any shape to face the world. We were in mourning, though not for a death, at least not a physical one. We were mourning the death of a relationship, of the future we had imagined with our daughter in it. We spent the day in a kind of limbo, moving through our normal routines without really engaging with them. I tried to read but couldn't focus on the words. George attempted to work on his latest woodworking project in the garage, but came back inside after just half an hour, the tools untouched. Around noon, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. With a trembling hand, I answered, hoping against hope that it might be Sienna. Mrs. Peterson? A woman's voice said. This is Rachel Kim. I'm a friend of Sienna's. From college. I vaguely remembered the name. A quiet, studious girl who had occasionally visited during Sienna's community college years. Yes, Rachel, I said. Is Sienna okay? There was a pause. That's why I'm calling. She's staying at my apartment right now. She showed up late last night, still in her wedding dress. She's not good, Mrs. Peterson. She won't eat, barely speaks. Just sits staring at the wall. My heart clenched. Did she ask you to call us? No, Rachel admitted. She'd probably be furious if she knew I was calling. But I'm worried about her. And I thought maybe you could help. I closed my eyes, torn between the desire to rush to my daughter and the knowledge that I was probably the last person she wanted to see right now. Rachel, I appreciate you calling, but I don't think my presence would help. Sienna and we've had a falling out. A serious one. I know, Rachel said quietly. She told me everything this morning. About the lies, the wedding, all of it. Everything. I asked, surprised. Yes. And Mrs. Peterson. She's not just sad or embarrassed. She's broken. I've never seen her like this. She keeps saying she's ruined everything, that there's nothing left. The despair in Rachel's voice sent a chill through me. What are you saying, Rachel? I'm scared for her, she said simply. She's talking about leaving town, disappearing. She mentioned selling her car for cash so she can start over where no one knows her. But the way she's talking, it's not healthy. It's like she thinks her life is over. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The hurt and anger I'd been carrying melted away, replaced by a mother's instinct to protect her child, no matter what. Sienna had made terrible choices. She had hurt us deeply. But she was still our daughter. Still the little girl we had raised and loved. Text me your address, I told Rachel. I'll be there as soon as I can. When I told George about the call, he immediately grabbed his keys. Let's go, he said, not hesitating for a moment. The drive to Rachel's apartment took 30 minutes, but it felt like hours. What would we say to Sienna? How could we bridge this massive gulf that had opened between us? Would she even agree to see us? Rachel met us in the parking lot, looking relieved but nervous. She's still inside, she said. She doesn't know you're coming. I'm not sure how she'll react. Thank you for calling us, George said, squeezing the young woman's shoulder. You're a good friend. Rachel led us to her second-floor apartment and unlocked the door. Sienna, she called gently. There's someone here to see you. We stepped into the small living room and saw her. Our daughter, still in her wedding dress, though it was now wrinkled and stained. Her hair had come loose from its elegant updo, falling in tangled strands around her face. Her makeup was smeared from crying. When she saw us, her eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in anger. "What are they doing here?" she demanded, glaring at Rachel. "Did you call them? How could you?" "I was worried about you," Rachel said. "The things you were saying." "Get out," Sienna said, her voice hard. "All of you. Get out." Rachel looked at us uncertainly. "Maybe I should give you some privacy. I'll be at the coffee shop down the street if you need me." After she left, the three of us stood in silence. Sienna on one side of the room, George and I on the other, a chasm of hurt and betrayal between us. "Sienna," I finally said, taking a cautious step forward. "We're so sorry for what happened yesterday." She laughed, a brittle, broken sound. Are you really? Because it seemed like you got exactly what you wanted. You humiliated me in front of everyone. You destroyed my future. You ruined everything." "We didn't want to hurt you," George said. "We just couldn't let you keep hurting yourself and others with those lies. So you decided to be judge, jury, and executioner," she spat. "You decided my entire future in one moment. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you know what it's like to walk through 200 people who are all staring at you like you're some kind of monster? To have the man you love turn away from you at the altar? We know it must have been painful," I acknowledged. "But Sienna, the foundation you were building was already crumbling. It was only a matter of time before the truth came out." She turned away from us, her shoulders shaking. "Just go. Please. I can't do this right now." "We're not leaving," George said firmly. "Not until we know you're okay." "I'll never be okay again," she said, so softly I almost didn't hear it. "It's all gone. Everything I worked for. Everything I built. My business, my relationship, my reputation. It's all gone." My heart ached for her. Despite everything, this was still my child in pain. "Sienna, look at me," I said gently. Reluctantly, she turned. "Nothing is gone forever," I told her. "Not your business. You're still a talented caterer. Not your reputation. People have short memories. And not your family, because we're still here. We'll always be here." "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why would you still want anything to do with me after what I've done? I've been horrible to you both. I denied you. I lied about you. I used you. Because we're your parents," George said simply. "And parents don't stop loving their children, even when they make mistakes. Even big ones." Something in Sienna seemed to crack then, some last wall of defense crumbling. She sank to the floor, her wedding dress pooling around her like a deflated dream, and began to sob deep, wrenching cries that seemed to come from her very soul. I didn't hesitate. I crossed the room and knelt beside her, gathering her in my arms the way I had when she was small and had skinned her knees or had a nightmare. George joined us a moment later, his strong arms encircling us both. "I'm sorry," Sienna cried over and over. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened to me. I don't know who I became." "Shoo," I soothed, stroking her tangled hair. "It's okay. We're here now. We'll figure this out together." We stayed that way for a long time, the three of us huddled on Rachel's living room floor. There was still so much to say, so much to work through. Trust to rebuild. Wounds to heal. But in that moment, something fundamental had shifted. A door that had seemed permanently closed had opened just a crack. It wasn't a happy ending. Not yet. But it was a beginning. A chance to find our way back to each other. To rebuild our family on a foundation of truth this time. And sometimes that's all you can ask for. A chance to try again. If you're still with me, thank you for listening to this difficult part of our story. Sometimes the path to healing goes through the darkest places first. If this journey resonates with you, please consider subscribing to this channel. In the next part, I'll share how we began to rebuild, and the surprising twists our story took in the months after the wedding that wasn't. The days that followed Sienna's failed wedding were some of the hardest our family had ever faced. After the breakdown in Rachel's apartment, Sienna agreed to come home with us. A decision that surprised me, given everything that had happened. She moved back into her old bedroom, though she spent most of the first few days just sleeping or staring out the window. The vibrant, ambitious daughter we knew seemed to have disappeared, replaced by a hollow-eyed young woman who moved through the house like a ghost. "Should we be worried?" George asked me one night, his voice low so Sienna wouldn't hear from her room across the hall. "She's barely eating, barely speaking." "I think she's in shock," I said. Her entire identity collapsed in one day. Everything she thought she was building, It's all gone. Not everything, George insisted. She still has us. Her talent. Her intelligence. But does she see that? Or does she only see what she's lost? We were doing our best to give Sienna space while still showing her we were there for her. I'd leave meals outside her door when she didn't want to join us at the table. George would sit quietly in her room in the evenings, not pushing her to talk, just providing a reassuring presence. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. A week after the wedding, Sienna came downstairs for breakfast without being called. 2 days later, she took a shower and put on clean clothes instead of the sweatpants she'd been living in. Small steps, but significant ones. Then came the phone calls. First from the local newspaper, wanting a statement about the wedding disaster that was apparently the talk of the town. Then from former clients of Sienna's catering business, politely canceling upcoming events. Then from the few friends who hadn't completely abandoned her, awkwardly trying to offer support while clearly feeling uncomfortable about the whole situation. Each call seemed to push Sienna further into herself, reinforcing the message that her life, as she knew it, was over. Until the day Victoria Williams called. I answered the phone, surprised to see her name on the caller ID. Victoria, is everything all right? As well as can be expected, under the circumstances, she replied, her voice as composed as ever. Ethan is processing everything. It's been difficult. I can imagine, I said. I'm so sorry for what he's going through. Thank you, Victoria said. But that's not why I'm calling. I'd like to speak with Sienna if she's willing. I froze. With Sienna? Are you sure? Very sure, Victoria confirmed. There are things I need to say to her. Things I think she needs to hear. I hesitated. Sienna was in such a fragile state. Would a conversation with Victoria help or harm her recovery? May I ask what this is about? I ventured. Healing, Victoria said simply. For everyone involved. I took a deep breath. Let me see if she's willing to talk. Can I call you back? I found Sienna in the backyard, sitting on the old swing George had hung from the oak tree when she was 7. She was pushing herself gently back and forth, staring at nothing in particular. Sienna, Victoria Williams is on the phone. She'd like to speak with you. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with alarm. Ethan's mother? Why? What does she want? She didn't say exactly. Just that there are things she needs to say to you. Sienna looked panicked. I can't talk to her. Not after what I did to her son. To her family. I think it might be important, I said gently. But it's your choice. She stared at the ground for a long moment, then nodded slightly. Okay, I'll talk to her. Back in the house, I handed Sienna the phone and left the room to give her privacy. The conversation lasted nearly 30 minutes. When Sienna finally emerged from the living room, her face was tear-streaked but somehow lighter, as if a burden had been partially lifted. What did she say? I asked carefully. Sienna sat down at the kitchen table, turning the phone over in her hands. She said she forgives me. I blinked in surprise. She forgives you? Not for Ethan's sake, Sienna clarified quickly. She said what I did to him was unforgivable, and that relationship is over forever. But for her own sake, for her own peace, she forgives me. She looked up at me bewildered. Why would she do that? Why would she even want to talk to me? Because Victoria is a wise woman, I said. And she understands that holding on to anger and resentment only hurts the person holding it. She also said something else, Sienna continued, her voice uncertain. She said that I have a gift, that my talents are real, even if the person I was pretending to be wasn't. She's right about that, I agreed. Your talents are real, Sienna. Your eye for beauty, your creativity, your ability to transform spaces and experiences. Those things are genuine. She offered me a job, Sienna said, the words tumbling out as if she couldn't quite believe them herself. A job? Doing what? Working at the Williams Foundation. They run charitable events throughout the year. Victoria says they could use someone with my event planning skills. Sienna shook her head, still looking stunned. She said it would be a way for me to use my talents for something positive, to give back to the community I hurt with my deception. I wasn't sure what to say. The offer seemed incredibly generous, given the circumstances. But I was wary too. Was this really a good idea, having Sienna work so closely with Ethan's family? What did you tell her? I asked. That I needed to think about it, Sienna said. That I wasn't sure I deserved a second chance. And what did she say to that? She said that's how she knew I might be ready for one. Because I wasn't assuming I deserved it. That night at dinner, Sienna joined us at the table for the first time since returning home. She didn't eat much, but she was present physically and mentally, in a way she hadn't been since the wedding day. "I've been thinking," she said, pushing her peas around her plate, "about Victoria's offer." George and I exchanged glances. "And," he prompted gently. "I think I want to take it," Sienna said. "But I'm scared." "Of what?" I asked. "Of facing people. Of walking into rooms where everyone knows what happened. Of seeing the judgment in their eyes." She put down her fork. "And most of all, I'm scared of seeing Ethan. Victoria says he doesn't work directly with the foundation, but it's still his family. He could show up at any time." "That's a legitimate fear," George acknowledged. "But hiding away forever isn't the answer either." "I know," Sienna said quietly. "That's why I think I need to do this. I need to face what I've done, the people I've hurt. I need to try to make amends, even if it's never enough." I reached across the table and took her hand. "That takes courage, Sienna. Real courage." "I don't feel courageous," she admitted. "I feel terrified. But I also feel like this might be my only chance to start rebuilding something real. Something honest." The next day, Sienna called Victoria and accepted the position. She would start the following Monday, giving her time to prepare herself mentally and emotionally for the challenges ahead. As the days passed, I watched my daughter slowly coming back to life. She cut her hair. The long blonde locks that had been part of her sophisticated image were replaced with a simple, shorter style closer to her natural brown color. She sorted through her closet, packing away the designer clothes she'd spent too much money on, returning to a simpler, more authentic style. "I don't even know who I was trying to be anymore," she said, holding up an expensive blouse she'd never worn. "All these things I thought I needed to be accepted, to be valued. They didn't make me happy. They just made me someone else." The morning of her first day at the Williams Foundation, Sienna was a bundle of nerves. She changed outfits 3 times, worried that everything she owned either looked too pretentious or too casual. "Just be yourself," I advised, watching her fret in front of the mirror. "The real Sienna is more than good enough." She gave me a small, sad smile. "I'm not sure I remember who the real Sienna is, Mom. I've been playing a part for so long." "Then this is your chance to rediscover her," I said. "One day at a time." George insisted on driving her to the foundation offices that first morning. "For moral support," he said, though I think he was also worried she might lose her nerve if left to drive herself. When they returned that evening, Sienna looked exhausted but somehow more settled, more present in her own skin. "How was it?" I asked as she collapsed onto the sofa. "Hard," she admitted. "So hard. Everyone was polite, but I could feel them watching me, wondering about me. A few people were openly cold." She sighed. "But Victoria was amazing. She introduced me as our new event coordinator with a fresh perspective. Never mentioned the wedding or anything about my past." "That was kind of her," George said. Sienna nodded. "More than kind. More than I deserve." She hesitated, then added, "Ethan came by the office around lunchtime." My heart skipped a beat. "Oh, what happened?" "He didn't know I would be there," Sienna said. "He looked shocked when he saw me, then angry. He spoke briefly with his mother in private, then left without saying a word to me." "I'm sorry," I said. "That must have been painful." "It was," she agreed. "But it was also clarifying somehow. Seeing the hurt in his eyes, the way he couldn't even look at me directly. It made what I did more real. The consequences more tangible." Over the next few weeks, a new rhythm established itself in our home. Sienna would go to work at the foundation each day, coming home with stories of the projects they were working on, the people she was meeting. Some days were better than others. Some nights she cried herself to sleep, the weight of her past mistakes still heavy on her shoulders. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, something was changing. The genuine Sienna, the one with creativity and warmth and a desire to make beautiful experiences for others, was re-emerging from beneath the ambitious, status-obsessed person she had become. 3 months after she started at the foundation, Sienna came home with significant news. "The annual Williams Foundation Gala is coming up," she told us over dinner. "It's their biggest fundraiser of the year. Over 500 guests, major donors, community leaders." "Sounds impressive," George said. "It is," Sienna confirmed. "And Victoria has asked me to take the lead on planning it." I nearly choked on my water. The lead? Already. That's a huge responsibility. Huge pressure, too, Sienna acknowledged. Everyone will be watching to see if I fail. If I can really deliver something extraordinary without the shortcuts I used to take. Shortcuts? George asked. Lies, Sienna clarified, not flinching from the word. Exaggerations about my experience. Promises I couldn't keep. Money I didn't have. This will be the first major event I've planned completely honestly, completely within budget, completely as myself. That's wonderful, I said. Victoria must have real confidence in your abilities. Or she's setting me up to fail, Sienna said, though she didn't sound like she believed it. Either way, I've accepted. The gala is in 2 months, and I have a ton of work to do. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Sienna threw herself into planning the gala with an intensity one hadn't seen since before the wedding disaster. But this time, there was something different about her approach. She wasn't cutting corners or making grand promises she couldn't keep. She was methodical, careful, realistic. She would spread her planning materials across our dining room table in the evenings, poring over budgets and vendor quotes, making calls to confirm details, always triple-checking everything. You're working yourself to exhaustion, I commented one night, finding her still at the table at 1 a.m. The gala isn't for 3 more weeks. I can't afford to make a single mistake, she said, not looking up from her spreadsheet. Not one. This has to be perfect, but perfect in a way I can actually deliver. Is this about impressing Victoria? I asked. Because I think she already believes in you, or she wouldn't have given you this opportunity. Sienna finally looked up, her eyes tired but clear. It's not about impressing anyone. It's about proving something to myself. That I can do this the right way. That I don't need to lie or manipulate to create something beautiful. The night of the gala arrived. Sienna had left for the venue, the Grand Hotel downtown, early that morning to oversee the final preparations. George and I hadn't been invited, which was understandable given the circumstances, but we were on edge all evening, waiting for news of how it was going. Around midnight, our doorbell rang. I opened it to find Sienna standing there, still in her simple black dress from the event, looking utterly drained but with a quiet glow about her. It's over, she said, coming inside and kicking off her heels. It's finally over. How did it go? George asked, joining us in the entryway. Sienna smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that I hadn't seen in ages. It was beautiful. Everything went according to plan. The donors were generous. Victoria was pleased. That's wonderful, I said, hugging her. I'm so proud of you. There's something else, Sienna said, pulling back slightly. Ethan was there. My heart sank. Oh, was that difficult? Yes and no, she said thoughtfully. We didn't speak. But at the end of the night, as everyone was leaving, he looked at me across the room and nodded. Just a small acknowledgement, but it felt significant somehow. Like a truce, George suggested. Not even that, Sienna said. More like recognition. That I was doing something worthwhile. That maybe I wasn't entirely the person he thought I was on our wedding day. She shrugged. Or maybe I'm reading too much into a simple nod. Either way, I said, you've accomplished something important tonight. Something real. It feels different, she admitted. Success without deception. It's quieter somehow. Less dramatic. But more solid. The gala marked a turning point for Sienna. In its aftermath, she seemed more confident, more settled in her own skin. Her position at the foundation became more secure, with Victoria publicly praising her work and giving her increased responsibilities. 6 months after the failed wedding, Sienna came to George and me with another decision. I'm moving out, she said. I've found a small apartment. Nothing fancy, just a studio near the foundation offices. But it's time for me to stand on my own 2 feet again. My heart twisted with both pride and anxiety. Are you sure you're ready? I think so, she said. I need to build my life again, my real life this time. I can't do that while living in my childhood bedroom. We'll miss having you here, George said. But we understand. This is a good step. I have you both to thank, Sienna said, looking at us with an openness I hadn't seen in years. For everything. For not giving up on me when I gave up on myself. For forcing me to face the truth, even when it hurt. For loving me through the worst mistake of my life. That's what parents do, I told her. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. The day Sienna moved into her new apartment was bittersweet. The place was tiny compared to the luxury condo she had shared with Ethan, with second-hand furniture and bare white walls. But as we helped her arrange her few belongings, there was a sense of rightness to it. This modest space represented something genuine, a fresh start built on truth rather than deception. "It's not much," she said, looking around the small studio. "But it's mine. Really mine." "It's perfect," George assured her. "And you can make it your own over time." As we prepared to leave, Sienna stopped us at the door. "There's something else I wanted to tell you both. Something important." "What is it?" I asked. She took a deep breath. "I've been talking with a therapist for the past few months, trying to understand how I became the person who could do what I did. Why I was so desperate for status and approval that I was willing to sacrifice everything real in my life." "That's wonderful, Sienna," I said, genuinely pleased. "That takes real courage." "It's helping," she said, slowly. "But there's something I realized recently that I wanted to share with you." She hesitated, gathering her thoughts. "For so long, I blamed you both for what I saw as our ordinary life. I was embarrassed by our house, our jobs, our lack of connections. I wanted more, and I convinced myself that wanting more meant rejecting where I came from." George and I exchanged glances, the old hurt stirring again. "But now I see that what you gave me was extraordinary," Sienna continued. "Not in terms of money or status, but in terms of love, stability, values. You worked so hard to give me opportunities, to support my dreams, to make me feel secure." Her voice broke slightly. "And I threw it all away for something shallow and meaningless." "You didn't throw it all away," I said gently. "You're here now. We're here. That's what matters." "What I'm trying to say," Sienna said, wiping away a tear, "is that I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Not just for the wedding and the lies, but for the years before that. For being ashamed of you both when I should have been grateful. For not seeing the real value in what you gave me." George stepped forward and wrapped Sienna in a hug. "We forgive you," he said simply. "We forgave you long ago." As we drove home from Sienna's new apartment, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The road ahead wouldn't be easy for any of us. There were still wounds healing, trust being rebuilt, relationships being redefined. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about our family's future. "Do you think she'll be okay?" George asked as we pulled into our driveway. I thought about the journey Sienna had been on, from the ambitious young woman desperate to escape her background, to the bride whose web of lies collapsed around her, to the person she was becoming now, step by painful step. "Yes," I said, surprised by how certain I felt. "I think she will. It won't be the life she once imagined for herself. It won't be easy or glamorous or filled with status symbols. But it will be real. And in the end, that's what matters most." If you're still with me, thank you for listening to this part of our story. The path to healing is rarely straight or simple, and it often takes us places we never expected to go. If this journey has resonated with you in any way, please consider subscribing to hear more stories like this one. And remember, sometimes the hardest choice is the only one that leads to true healing. Over the next year, Sienna continued to rebuild her life piece by piece. Her work at the Williams Foundation gave her purpose and structure. Her therapy gave her insight, and her new, more modest lifestyle gave her an authenticity she'd been missing for years. George and I watched her transformation with a mixture of pride and caution. We'd seen her change before, from our sweet, creative daughter to the status-obsessed woman who had rejected us. Could this new change be trusted? Was it genuine and lasting? 15 months after the failed wedding, the Williams Foundation announced their biggest project yet. A community center in the underserved east side of town, the same neighborhood where we lived. It would provide after-school programs, job training, healthcare services, and more for families who couldn't afford them elsewhere. "I've been put in charge of the grand opening gala," Sienna told us one Sunday during her weekly dinner at our house. "It's going to be huge media coverage, local politicians, major donors. Victoria says it's the most important event in the foundation's history." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely happy for her. "She must really trust your abilities now." "I think she does," Sienna agreed. "But there's something else." She hesitated, twisting her napkin nervously. "She wants me to give a speech at the opening. About my journey. About how people can transform their lives when given a second chance." George and I exchanged glances. "How do you feel about that?" he asked. "Terrified," Sienna admitted. It would mean publicly acknowledging everything. The lies, the wedding disaster, all of it. Most people in town already know the basic story, of course, but not the details. Not how deep the deception went. She looked down at her plate. And not how much I've changed since then. Do you have to do it? I asked. Couldn't someone else speak? Sienna shook her head. Victoria thinks it would be powerful coming from me. Especially since this center is in our neighborhood, where I grew up. The place I was once so desperate to escape from. She gave a sad laugh. Ironic, isn't it? The community I was ashamed of is now the focus of my most important work. Life has a way of bringing us full circle sometimes, George observed. There's something else, Sienna said, looking nervous again. I'd like you both to be there. Not just in the audience, but on stage with me. As part of my story. I felt my throat tighten with emotion. After everything that had happened, after the way she had once rejected us, our daughter was now asking us to stand beside her publicly. Are you sure? I asked. We'd be happy to support you from the audience. I'm sure, she said firmly. My story doesn't make sense without you both. The mistakes I made, the values I rejected, the lessons I've learned, they all revolve around you. Around the parents I was once ashamed of, but now draw strength from. George reached across the table and took Sienna's hand. Then we'll be there. Whatever you need. The weeks leading up to the community center opening were intense. Sienna worked longer hours than ever, determined to make the event perfect. Meanwhile, she labored over her speech, writing draft after draft, often calling us late at night to read portions of it aloud, seeking our feedback. Is it too much? She would ask. Too personal? Too revealing? It's your story to tell, I would remind her. Only you can decide how much to share. 3 days before the event, Sienna came to our house with unexpected news. Ethan wants to meet with me, she said, looking stunned. Tomorrow. For coffee. Ethan Williams? George clarified, as if there could be any other Ethan in Sienna's life. Your ex-fiancé? Sienna nodded. His mother told him about my speech, about what I'm planning to say at the opening. Apparently, he wants to talk before I go public with everything. Are you going to meet him? I asked, concerned about how this might affect her. I think I have to, she said. I owe him that much at least. The next day, Sienna met Ethan at a small cafe downtown. George and I waited anxiously at home, wondering what this could mean for her carefully reconstructed life. When she returned, her expression was difficult to read. Not devastated as I'd feared, but thoughtful, almost serene. How did it go? I asked cautiously. It was healing, Sienna said, sitting down on our sofa. For both of us, I think. We talked for almost 3 hours. What did he want? George asked. To understand, Sienna said simply. All this time, he's been trying to make sense of what happened between us. Why I lied. Why I was willing to risk everything for status and appearances. She shook her head slightly. He's been in therapy too, working through the trust issues I left him with. That's good, I said. That he's getting help. It is, Sienna agreed. And it gave us a common language to talk about everything. He asked questions I didn't have good answers for during our relationship, but now I could explain. Not to excuse what I did, but to help him understand it. And how did he respond? George asked. With more compassion than I deserved, Sienna said, her eyes filling with tears. He said he's forgiven me, not because I deserve forgiveness, but because holding on to anger was hurting him more than it was hurting me. I nodded, understanding completely. Victoria Williams had taught her son well. There's something else, Sienna continued. Ethan asked if he could attend the community center opening. Not to cause a scene or make things awkward, but because he wants to support the work the foundation is doing. And because, she took a deep breath, because he wants to hear my speech. How do you feel about that? I asked. Nervous, she admitted. But also validated somehow? Like if he can face me after what I did to him, maybe I really have changed. Maybe this new version of me is real enough that even the person I hurt the most can see the difference. The night before the community center opening, none of us slept well. Sienna stayed at our house, too anxious to be alone in her apartment. I found her at 2 a.m., sitting at the kitchen table with her speech spread out in front of her, making last-minute edits. You should try to sleep, I said, sitting down beside her. Tomorrow's a big day. I know, she sighed. I just can't stop thinking about all the people who will be there. People who knew me before, who saw me at my worst. People who probably still think of me as that manipulative, status-obsessed woman who got publicly humiliated at her own wedding. Some might, I acknowledged. But others will see you for who you are now, and the ones who matter will recognize your growth. What if I freeze up there? She worried. What if I can't get the words out? Then your father and I will be right beside you, I assured her. But you won't freeze. This story is too important to you. The next day dawned clear and bright. The new community center stood gleaming in the morning sun, a modern building in the heart of our modest neighborhood. Banners and balloons decorated the entrance, and a stage had been set up on the front lawn for the opening ceremonies. By noon, the crowd had begun to gather: foundation staff, community members, media representatives, local politicians. George, Sienna, and I waited in a small room inside the center, away from the growing audience. Sienna looked beautiful in a simple blue dress. No designer label, no excessive jewelry, just our daughter, authentic and nervous and brave. I keep thinking about who I was 2 years ago, she said, peeking through the blinds at the assembling crowd. How desperate I was to impress people like this. How I thought the only way to matter was to pretend to be someone I wasn't. And now, George asked. Now I'm terrified they won't accept who I really am, she admitted with a small laugh. But at least it's the real me they'll be judging. At 1 o'clock, Victoria Williams came to fetch us. It's time, she said, giving Sienna an encouraging smile. The mayor has finished his remarks. You're up next. We followed Victoria onto the stage, blinking in the bright sunlight. The crowd was larger than I had expected. Several hundred people sitting in chairs on the lawn, with more standing around the perimeter. In the front row, I spotted Ethan Williams sitting beside his father, his expression neutral but attentive. Victoria stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to introduce our next speaker. As the Williams Foundation's Director of Community Outreach, she has been instrumental in bringing this center to life. But her connection to this community runs much deeper than her professional role. Please welcome Sienna Peterson. The applause was polite, but not enthusiastic. Many in the crowd clearly recognized Sienna, and I could see the whispers, the nudges, the curious stares. The woman whose wedding disaster had been the talk of the town was now standing before them, about to speak. Sienna approached the microphone, her hands visibly shaking. George and I stood a few steps behind her, close enough to support her, but giving her the space to tell her story. Thank you, Victoria, Sienna began, her voice surprisingly steady. And thank you all for being here today to celebrate this incredible new resource for our community. My name is Sienna Peterson, and I grew up 3 blocks from where we're standing today. She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. Many of you know parts of my story already. Some of you were even there for its most public and painful chapter. But today, I want to tell you the whole truth. Not because I enjoy reliving my mistakes, but because I believe my journey might help others who are struggling with the same demons I faced. For the next 20 minutes, Sienna spoke with raw honesty about her life. About growing up in a modest home with parents who worked hard and loved her unconditionally. About developing a talent for creating beautiful events and experiences. About the moment she began to see her background as a liability rather than a foundation. I became obsessed with status, she admitted to the hushed crowd. With being perceived as successful, sophisticated, connected. I started small, exaggerating details about my business, name-dropping clients I barely knew. But over time, the lies grew larger. I began reinventing my entire history, denying my own parents, creating a fictional version of myself I thought would be more acceptable to the world I wanted to enter. She turned slightly toward us, her eyes meeting mine. These are my parents, Linda and George Peterson. My dad has worked at the factory on Millard Street for over 35 years. My mom cleans houses and does bookkeeping for small businesses. They took second mortgages on their home to help me start my catering business. They worked extra shifts to put money away for my college education and my wedding. She turned back to the audience. And how did I repay their love and sacrifice? By becoming ashamed of them. By lying about them. By ultimately excluding them from my wedding, because I thought they weren't good enough for the image I wanted to project. A murmur ran through the crowd. Even those who knew about the wedding disaster hadn't heard the full story before. What you might not know is that while I was telling my fiancé and his family that my parents were distant relatives who raised me after my real parents died, I was simultaneously using their money to fund an extravagant wedding they weren't even invited to. I could see the shock on many faces in the audience. This level of deception was beyond what most had imagined. When my parents discovered what I was doing, they had a choice to make, Sienna continued. They could have stayed silent, continued funding my lies, allowed me to build my marriage on a foundation of deception. Or they could stand up for the truth, even knowing it would likely cost them their relationship with their only daughter. She turned to look at us again, tears now streaming down her face. They chose truth. It was the hardest, bravest, most loving choice they could have made, though I couldn't see it at the time. When the truth came out at my wedding, I was humiliated, devastated, furious with my parents for exposing me. Sienna wiped her tears with a tissue Victoria quietly handed her. What I couldn't see then, but understand clearly now, is that they saved me from myself, from the person I was becoming, someone who valued appearances over authenticity, someone who would sacrifice the people who truly loved her for the approval of people who only cared about status and connections. She straightened her shoulders, her voice growing stronger. The day my wedding fell apart was the day my real life began. A harder life in many ways. A humbler life. But an honest one. Sienna then spoke about her journey over the past 2 years. About moving back home with her parents. About the opportunity Victoria had given her at the foundation. About the therapy that had helped her understand the roots of her desperate need for status and approval. I stand before you today not as someone who has it all figured out, she said. I'm still a work in progress. I still struggle with insecurity, with the temptation to present myself as more than I am. But I'm learning day by day that the only path to genuine fulfillment is authenticity. She gestured to the building behind us. This community center represents everything I once tried to escape from, and everything I've now come to value. It's not glamorous. It doesn't come with prestige or status, but it offers something far more valuable. Real connection, real support, real community. As Sienna neared the end of her speech, I noticed something happening in the audience. People who had been watching with skepticism or judgment were now leaning forward, engaged. Some were nodding. Others were wiping away tears. I want to thank 3 people today, Sienna said, her voice thick with emotion. First, Victoria Williams, who saw value in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Who offered me a second chance I didn't deserve but desperately needed. Victoria nodded, her eyes glistening. Second, my parents, who loved me enough to hold me accountable. Who never gave up on me, even when I rejected everything they stood for. George reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. And finally, Sienna continued, her voice dropping slightly, I want to thank Ethan Williams. A hush fell over the crowd as all eyes turned to Ethan in the front row. He sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable. Ethan, I know no apology can ever fully address the harm I caused you, Sienna said, looking directly at him. But I want you to know that you deserved better than what I was, better than the person who valued your family name more than your heart. The fact that you can sit here today, supporting this community and this foundation, speaks volumes about your character. Thank you for showing me what real integrity looks like. She turned back to the broader audience for her conclusion. This community center is named New Beginnings for a reason. It offers fresh starts for people who need them, educational opportunities, job training, support services. But it also represents my own new beginning. A chance to give back to the community I once rejected. A chance to use my skills and talents in service of something meaningful, not just impressive. Sienna stepped back from the microphone, clearly finished. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then, starting slowly but building rapidly, applause swept through the crowd. People began to stand. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet, applauding with genuine enthusiasm. I watched in amazement as the community that had once gossiped about Sienna's downfall now celebrated her vulnerability and growth. Victoria stepped forward to hug her, whispering something in her ear that made Sienna smile through her tears. Then, to my surprise, Ethan Williams rose from his seat and approached the stage. He didn't come up the steps, but he stood at the edge waiting. After a moment's hesitation, Sienna walked over to him. I couldn't hear what they said to each other, but I saw Ethan extend his hand. Sienna took it, and they shared a brief, respectful handshake. Not reconciliation exactly, but a kind of peace. An acknowledgement that they had both survived, both grown, both moved forward. As the applause finally died down and people began making their way into the community center for tours and refreshments, Sienna returned to where George and I stood. "You did it," I said, hugging her tightly. "I'm so proud of you." "We both are," George added, joining our embrace. Over her shoulder, I could see people watching us. This family reunion that was also a public reconciliation. The story of the daughter who had rejected her parents, then found her way back to them through hard-earned wisdom and humility. "Thank you," Sienna whispered, her arms still around us. "For everything. For never giving up on me. For loving me enough to let me fall. That's what real love is," I told her. Not protecting someone from consequences, but standing with them as they face them. As we made our way into the community center, dozens of people approached Sienna, some to congratulate her on the speech, others to share their own stories of mistakes and redemption. What struck me most was the genuineness in these interactions. For perhaps the first time in her adult life, Sienna was connecting with people as her authentic self, not as the persona she had once crafted so carefully. And to my surprise, people were responding not with judgment or rejection, but with acceptance and appreciation. The truth, it seemed, had set more than just Sienna free. If you're still with me on this journey, I want to thank you for your patience and compassion. Our story isn't over yet. There's still one more chapter to share. If you're finding value in these difficult but important life lessons, please consider subscribing to this channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that might help others facing similar challenges. The opening of the New Beginnings Community Center marked not just a new chapter for our neighborhood, but for our family as well. The public nature of Sienna's speech, her complete honesty about her mistakes and her journey, seemed to lift a weight that had been pressing on all of us for years. No more secrets. No more shame. No more pretending to be something we weren't. There was a freedom in that transparency that brought us closer than we had been since Sienna was a little girl. In the months that followed, remarkable things began to happen. Sienna's role at the Williams Foundation expanded. Victoria, recognizing her genuine talent for event planning and community outreach, promoted her to Director of Special Projects, with a significant increase in salary and responsibilities. "You've earned this," Victoria told her at a small celebration dinner where George and I were invited guests. Not through deception or manipulation, but through hard work, creativity, and authentic connection with the communities we serve. Even more surprising was the way Sienna's professional reputation began to rebuild itself. The speech she had given, which had been covered by local media and shared widely on social media, resonated with people in unexpected ways. Her vulnerability and honesty, rather than diminishing her in people's eyes, elevated her. "I got a call from the mayor's office yesterday," she told us one Sunday during our now regular family dinner. "They want me to consult on the city's annual charity gala. They specifically mentioned my fresh perspective and community-focused approach." "That's wonderful," I said. "Are you going to do it?" "I think so," she said. "But on one condition, that we create scholarship opportunities for students from our neighborhood as part of the event. If I'm going to be involved, I want it to have real impact, not just be a chance for wealthy people to feel good about themselves for one night." George and I exchanged pleased glances. This was the Sienna we had always known was there, creative, passionate, purpose-driven. But now those qualities were channeled toward meaningful goals, not superficial status symbols. Around the same time, something unexpected happened in my own life. One of the homes I cleaned belonged to Janet Morris, the owner of a successful local bookkeeping and tax preparation firm. After years of making small talk while I dusted her office, she suddenly made me an offer. "Linda," she said one day, "I've been watching how meticulously you organize everything. And I remember you mentioning you have bookkeeping experience. Would you consider coming to work for my firm? We need someone with your attention to detail." At 56, I had never expected a career change. The idea both thrilled and terrified me. "I don't have a degree in accounting," I reminded her. "Just some community college courses and experience doing books for small businesses." "That's enough to start with," Janet assured me. "We can train you on the rest. And your people skills are excellent. Clients would love you." When I told George and Sienna about the offer, they were both enthusiastically supportive. "You should do it, Mom," Sienna insisted. "You've spent years supporting everyone else's dreams. It's time for yours." So I took the leap. Within 6 months, I was no longer cleaning houses. Instead, I was managing the books for a dozen small businesses, working in a professional office, earning more than I ever had before. The woman who had once been considered not sophisticated enough to attend her daughter's wedding was now a respected professional in her own right. George's life changed too. After 37 years at the factory, he was approaching retirement age. But rather than slowing down, he found a new passion: volunteering at the New Beginnings Community Center, teaching woodworking classes to teenagers and adults looking to develop trade skills. "These kids remind me of myself at that age," he told me. "Looking for a path, a skill, a way to support themselves with dignity. If I can help even a few of them find that, it's worth every minute." As for Sienna, her journey of transformation continued to surprise us. About a year after the community center opening, she came to dinner with unexpected news. "I've been approached about starting my own event planning business again," she said. "But not like before. This would be focused on community events, nonprofit fundraisers, inclusive celebrations, events with purpose, not just style." "That sounds perfect for you," I said. "Will you take it?" "I'm considering it," she said. "But I'd want to do it differently this time. Build slowly, honestly. No exaggerations, no overpromising. Just quality work that speaks for itself." "And what does Victoria think?" George asked, knowing how important Sienna's relationship with the Williams family had become. "She's the one who suggested it," Sienna said with a small smile. "She thinks the foundation could be my first client, but that my talents could benefit other organizations too." 3 months later, Sienna officially launched Genuine Events by Sienna Peterson. The name was deliberate, both a commitment to authenticity and a reclaiming of her family name, the one she had once been so eager to trade for Williams. Her business cards were simple, elegant without being flashy. Her website told her story honestly. Founded by Sienna Peterson, who believes in the power of authentic connection and meaningful celebration. After a journey that taught her the true value of honesty and integrity, Sienna now dedicates her talent for creating beautiful events to causes and communities that make a real difference. To our delight, clients responded positively to this transparency. In a world of carefully curated images and personal brands, Sienna's openness about her past mistakes and current values stood out. She didn't get every contract she bid for, but the ones she secured were with organizations that shared her values and appreciated her genuine approach. 2 years after the failed wedding, and all the painful growth that followed, our family gathered for a different kind of celebration. Sienna had purchased her first home, a modest but charming 2-bedroom cottage not far from our neighborhood. It wasn't in the exclusive gated community where she had once planned to live with Ethan, but it was entirely hers, bought with money she had earned honestly. The housewarming party was small, just family, close friends, and a few colleagues from the Williams Foundation. As I helped Sienna arrange flowers in the kitchen of her new home, I marveled at how far we had all come. "Did you ever imagine we'd be here?" I asked her. "After everything that happened?" She shook her head, smiling. "Never. I thought my life was over when the wedding fell apart. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered." She looked around her cozy kitchen, at the home she had purchased herself, at the life she had rebuilt. I had no idea I was actually finding what really mattered. Later that evening, as guests mingled in Sienna's small backyard, Victoria Williams pulled me aside. "I wanted to tell you something, Linda," she said. "Something I think you should know." "What's that?" I asked, curious about her serious tone. "Ethan is engaged again," she said. "To a lovely young woman he met through his volunteer work. She's kind, honest, completely without pretense." I nodded, wondering why she was telling me this. "I'm happy for him. He deserves that." "Yes, he does," Victoria agreed. "But here's what I wanted you to know. When he told me about the engagement, do you know what he said?" He said, "Mom, I would never have recognized what real love looks like if I hadn't experienced what it isn't first." I felt a lump form in my throat. "Meaning Sienna?" Victoria nodded. Their relationship, painful as it was, taught him valuable lessons, as did the aftermath. She looked across the yard to where Sienna was laughing with her friends. "And I believe the same is true for your daughter. Sometimes our greatest failures become our most important teachers." That night, after all the guests had left and George and I were preparing to head home, Sienna walked us to our car. "Thank you for everything today," she said. "For helping with the party, for being here, for everything over the past 2 years. That's what family does," George said simply. Sienna nodded, then hesitated, as if gathering courage for something difficult. "I've been thinking a lot about that recently. About family. and I wanted to ask you both something. What is it? I asked. Would you be open to coming with me to visit Aunt Celia next month? I know it's been years since we've seen her, but she's getting older, and I've been thinking about how important family is. All family, not just the ones who can do something for us. Aunt Celia was George's elderly aunt who lived in a nursing home 2 hours away. We used to visit her regularly when Sienna was young, but those visits had fallen away as our lives got busier. And during Sienna's status-seeking years, she had shown no interest in maintaining connections with our extended family, especially those who weren't wealthy or influential. I think that's a wonderful idea, I said, touched by this evidence of how genuinely Sienna had changed. She would love to see you. Great, Sienna said, looking relieved. I'll arrange it. Maybe we can take her to lunch, bring her some flowers. She'd like that, George said, his voice thick with emotion. This simple suggestion, reconnecting with a forgotten family member, represented everything that had changed in Sienna, everything she had learned. As we drove home that night, George was quiet for a long time, just holding my hand across the console of our car. The same modest sedan we'd had for years, now a symbol of the authentic life we'd never needed to apologize for. We did it, Linda, he said finally. We got our daughter back. We did, I agreed, squeezing his hand. But she had to find herself first. 5 years have passed since Sienna's wedding day ended before it truly began. 5 years of healing, growing, rebuilding. Our lives today would be unrecognizable to the people we were then. I've been promoted twice at the accounting firm and now manage my own team. George has retired from the factory, but teaches woodworking classes full-time at the community center and 3 others like it across the city. Sienna's business has grown steadily, with a reputation for creating meaningful events that bring communities together rather than showcasing wealth or status. We're not wealthy by conventional standards. We don't live in mansions or drive luxury cars or vacation in exotic locations. But we're rich in ways that matter more. In purpose, in authentic relationships, in the knowledge that we're living in alignment with our values. Sometimes, when we gather for our weekly family dinners, now hosted at Sienna's home as often as at ours, I look around the table and marvel at the journey we've taken. The painful, necessary lessons we've learned. The growth that only comes through facing hard truths about ourselves. Recently, Sienna shared something with me that I'll never forget. We were washing dishes together after dinner, a simple domestic task that had somehow become a treasured ritual. You know what I realized the other day, Mom? She said, rinsing a plate. I spent so many years being ashamed of where I came from, desperate to escape into what I thought was a better world. But now, when I look at my life, at my work, my home, my relationships, I realize I've created something very similar to what you and Dad built. A life of purpose, honesty, and genuine connection. She handed me the plate to dry. The very things I once rejected turned out to be what I wanted all along. I just had to learn to value them. If you're watching this from your home right now, perhaps there's a lesson here for you too. Maybe you're struggling with accepting your background, or you're tempted to present yourself as something you're not to gain approval. Maybe you have a loved one who's lost their way, who values appearances over authenticity. If so, I hope our story offers some comfort, some guidance, some hope. The path to a meaningful life isn't always straight or easy. Sometimes it requires painful detours, hard lessons, moments of complete breakdown before the breakthrough can occur. But I can tell you this with absolute certainty. A life built on truth, however modest it may appear to others, brings a peace and satisfaction that no amount of status or wealth ever could. And relationships founded on authentic connection, on being known and accepted for who you really are worth more than any social advantage gained through deception. Our story isn't over. Sienna continues to grow in ways that surprise and delight us. George and I are enjoying this chapter of our lives more than we ever expected. And the community center that symbolized so much of our journey continues to transform lives in our neighborhood. If this story has touched you in some way, please consider subscribing to this channel. There are more stories to tell, more lessons to share. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing this journey, please share it with them. Because sometimes the most powerful gift we can give each other is the truth of our experiences. The failures as well as the successes, the detours as well as the destinations. It's in sharing these authentic stories that we help each other find our way home to ourselves. Thank you for listening to our story. From my family to yours, I wish you a life of genuine connection, meaningful purpose, and the courage to be exactly who you are.